I played that song especially for my daughter Rebecca, who's listening in tonight, and that was of course Desolation Row from My Chemical Romance, which was from the end titles of the Watchmen movie, which in a strange way in itself was a comic book which sort of interspersed with quite a few conspiracy theories of its own. That being said, it's time for us to actually start the show. I'm joined by my good friend, fellow brother and, well, tonight, not so conspiratorial playmate, so to speak.
Hey,
good
buddy.
evening, Nudge.
Hey, buddy, how are you doing?
I'm not so bad, not so
and
bad.
Hello, Becky and everybody. How are you doing?
What I'd like to say, first of all, before we go any further, I don't know how people manage to trawl through all the 9/11 stuff and make these documentaries and audio stuff and that. For me, it really was a labour. I'm not saying a labour of love, but it was to go through all that. It was quite heartbreaking and that. So I just want to say, tonight's show, it might be perhaps try to show an alternate view on what may have been, what could possibly be, but we don't know because the proof is neither there, here or there, either way. Whatever it is, though, there was an awful loss of life on the date of 9/11. That cannot be taken away. We're just trying to have a look here at perhaps an alternate way of thinking. In saying that, I'm just going to kick off the show with a song, and there'll be a little piece of audio as well, and then we're going to bring Dave in, who's going to be joining us on Skype, and then we're going to get on with the show properly. So just to sort of get everything in the right flavour for the evening, this is Shakedown and a little song called Can You Handle It?
Yeah.
The aptly titled Can You Handle It? That was from Shakedown. Okay, so as you know, tonight's show is going to be about 9/11. What happened, what allegedly happened, what possibly happened. And just to continue from this, I'm just going to play this. It's a good 6 minutes long, but it is worth listening to. And then Nodge has got something to say as well, and then we'll be firing up with Dave as well. So then it's going to be the three-way. Of course, Skype will be running. All you got to do is join us on Skype if you wish. You can send us a text message as well if you'd like. You can do that by texting us on 07463 39815, or go to tachyonradio.com. That's the webpage, and that's got everywhere on there for you to get in touch with us. In the meantime, just want you to listen to this.
Say again. Director 956, did you understand that transmission? Yeah, that transmission you said was unreasonable. It sounded like someone said they have a bomb on board. Sir, did you hear the transmission where the airplane that said he had a bomb on board? Affirmative, he said there was a bomb on board. That's what we thought. We didn't get it clear. That aircraft, he can't get a hold of it. He turned to the east now? He just turned to the east also. Okay, 956, we had a visual on him. Just stand by. Do you have a visual on him now? We did, but we lost him at the turn. If you can make a turn back to 220 heading, let me know if you can see him. Yeah. They were making a turn at 956. Okay, American 10-6 and Executive 956, we just lost the target on that aircraft.
Man, Z100 852. Something weird is going on.
Yeah.
The World Trade Center is on fire.
Oh my Seriously, goodness. The top of the building. We're trying to get information.
Top level of one of the news to unfold from New York City.
A plane crashed. Just.
My sister's in that building.
Okay.
And I hope she's okay. And I got to run to New York. Oh my God! It's complete pandemonium.
First of all, calm down.
There's raining papers and ashes and.
155. A second plane has now flown in.
Wait, explosion at the Pentagon?
A third location is on alert and outside of Washington.
I don't have words to describe what I'm witnessing right now.
Effective immediately until further notice. Flight operations in the national airspace system by United States civil aircraft and foreign civil and military aircraft are prohibited.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
Not on itself, and it is.
It just landed on Manhattan.
All right, so now we look back up to the TV. One of the World Trade Towers has collapsed and fallen.
I've never seen anything like this.
I've got 5 patients. They need to be. We got an ambulance full of cops and pedestrians. Somebody just collapsed. You don't have much more. Another tower that just came down, 1013. All the cops away from the building. She got a female officer down. Female officer, where are you now, King? Where are you, King? Where are you?
We're not going to be stopped. We're not going to be deterred. We're not going to stay at home. We're not going to be frightened. We're going to live our lives as Americans.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
We're all brothers. We all got to stick together.
One nation, under God, indivisible.
My God, look at the skyline without the towers.
It is Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. This is Glenn Beck. Dateline, New York. In one of the most audacious attacks ever, terrorists hijacked 2 airliners, crashed them into the World Trade Center in a coordinated series of blows today that brought down the twin 110-story towers. Thousands may be dead. 58,000 people work at the World Trade Center.
Honestly, I just wanted to let you know I love you, and I'm stuck in this building. I'm waiting at the building for a bomb went off. We don't know, but there's lots of smoke, and he just wanted you to know that I love you always.
One plane, United Flight 93, crashed north of Somerset County Airport, a small airport 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. United said that flight, Boeing 757, left Newark at 8:01, and it presented as over 38 minutes.
We will not turn.
It is as old as the scriptures.
We will not falter.
And is as clear.
And we will not fail.
As the American Constitution.
That is the news of this day, September 11th, 2001.
Is that United 93? Is that United 93 calling? United 93. United 93. United 93. Is that United 93?
That's the some of the audio of that, which was captured on the day of the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York. Right, what we're going to do now, I'm just going to see if I can get hold of Dave and bring him into the conversations, and then Nodge is going to kick off the show with just with something that he's written. Okay, so let's just see what we can do. Just 1 second. Let's see if we can get the man himself. Technology on the march.
Hello.
Hello.
Dave.
Are you alright?
Yeah, you mate?
Yeah, I'm not bad. I've had to turn the streaming audio off so I can only monitor via this.
Oh, it's okay. You won't hear us calling you on the other one then.
Okay, cool. I'm here anyway.
How you doing, mate?
I'm absolutely fine. I'm a little bit fed up. I couldn't get down in person. It would have been nice to see you both, but I will get there next time.
No problem at all.
No worries, mate.
No
How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Not yourself?
Yeah, I'm very good, mate. All the better for
Excellent.
being here, actually. It's good to be putting the grey matter into gear, isn't it, really?
It is good to exercise it.
It is.
It's therapeutic for everybody.
Therapeutic for others.
Not so much a radio station, but a counselling procedure.
Nothing wrong with that.
Okay. You're set for tonight with the talk on the old conspiracy side of stuff, aren't you, mate?
I'm going to wing it.
You're going to wing it, okay. Well, Nodgy's going to introduce a little bit for us, so if you'd like to pin back your lug-holes and have a listen for a few minutes, and then we'll get on with tonight's proceedings.
Okay.
All right, Nodgy, over to you.
Well, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate tonight. One of the
I got the high score on that one.
That's a pretty good game, actually. Yeah, 180. Yeah. Steve's kindly dubbed me the sort of the voice of reason of Tachyon, and while I like science fiction, fantasy, ufology, spiritualist writing, research, particularly the study of near-death experiences, underlying, I'm a rationalist and a skeptic. So what I try to do is I'm always looking for a way to burn away the unproven, the fraudulent and the merely silly, and sift out the very, very rare, intriguing evidence which raises either unreasonable doubts or warrants further investigation or thought. There's one category inquiry I'm really taken with, I must be honest, it's conspiracy theories. I don't doubt that a few hold water, in fact I don't doubt that a good many do. But from my perspective, they speak more about human psychology, of people trying to impose an underlying reason and pattern on very shocking or random or chaotic or unusual events. So, before I get a bit further into the 9/11 conspiracy theories, which I've not been through systematically, there are far too many as we all know, I'm not going to dignify them all with an analysis either. Here's my take on some of the classic conspiracy theories outside of 9/11, which 9/11 is just a great thread in the reel of occasionally nutty ideas that people get about all sorts of easily explicable events, in my opinion. Again, there's simply not enough time to go through them all, because there are thousands and thousands and thousands that really go back to the dawn of time. I think one of the problems is what we might call Nodgy's first law of conspiracy theories, and it's the most problematic. For every one event, situation, or institution which gives rise to controversy, there's 100 conspiracy theories. Now, think about that for a second. What that means is very often the actual mainstream explanation is often ignored and under-analysed, and perhaps we can discuss that a little bit later.
Yep, most certainly. So that's the kick-off for tonight. Nodgy's going to be looking at the side which sort of not so much kicks conspiracy theories away, but certainly looks at the actual theories behind them, whereas I think me and Dave are going to be sort of coming at it from another angle, because some of the stuff we actually do study, we often do find that the so-called truth that we're given by governmental figures is not necessarily the case. Are you in agreement with that, Dave?
I think I've rationally tried to sift my way through what's presented from both sides of the argument, you know, and there's something from both camps that suggest a story, but not necessarily the whole story. And again, I don't want to say too much just yet, because obviously we're going to progress as the night goes on. But I'm sort of more your side, but can see Nodgy's side. So I'm kind of in the middle with it. Almost, you know.
Well, this is it. I mean, the entire reasoning behind the show for tonight is the fact that yes, we can have a look at the official side of it, but we also have to look at the official side where there's inconsistencies, where there's downright lies, and where there is downright lies, and we have to look at what the other possibilities may be based on the evidence which has been put forward to sort of counterbalance the so-called official stories, which sometimes hold no weight at all.
I must say,
lack of evidence from both sides.
Yeah, exactly. I must say at the outset, I mean, I'm not out to excoriate every single theory. I think the thing is, it's as you've said before, Dave, about your field, it's about evaluating the evidence rationally and calmly and sifting out the wheat from the chaff, isn't it?
Well, that's most definite, for the simple reason. I mean, some of the stories and theories behind 9/11, you sometimes have to act as quite nonsensical. Was it David Shaler, I think, for one of the things?
Well, I'm going to be talking a little bit about that, and I think the one thing we need to do is to separate the genuine theory from the conjecture, and very often where the media has actually misreported events, as we'll be talking about in terms of the Bin Laden family in the immediate aftermath of 9/11.
Okay, so what else are we going to be doing in the course of this evening? On the day of the 9/11 attacks, radio stations were contacted and they were given a list of records that they would not be allowed to play on that day because they thought it may be deemed as inappropriate. So tonight we're going to be playing some of the records what were on that list, and inappropriate or not, we're going to play them anyway, because unfortunately, and you know, it's no fact that it's going to be irreverent or that it's, you know, in bad taste or anything like that. These are damn good tunes, and it's just a shame that something what happened on that day could have, you know, sort of stopped somebody from listening to a damn good tune on that day. So first up, and it sounds so obvious and probably so awful as well, but I'm going to play it. This is the Foo Fighters and Learn to Fly. Dave, we'll be back with you shortly, okay, mate?
Okay.
See you soon, Dave.
Foo Fighters there, Learn to Fly. What do you think of that one, Dave?
I absolutely love that one. I saw no irreverence in it whatsoever.
No, and I know you're sort of a big fan of the Foos as well, aren't you?
Oh, yes, indeed, yes.
and not just the UFO types from the 1940s.
No, the thing that used to bug the old P-51 Mustangs over in Berlin.
Yeah, what is it? Kugelfuhrel, Thingel, Funkum, Bum Bums, or whatever they used to call them.
Is that not like a German takeaway food?
Yeah, I think it was, actually. I
think it's related to sauerkraut.
Klunkenhoffen.
That sauerkraut was when we beat him at football, but that's... Oh, right, okay then. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Okay, where do you want to start, lads? And there's a deadly silence and everyone looks at me.
Is that what they call dead air in the radio business, is it?
It's called your sacked.
I think it's got to be at the beginning, really. I mean, the whole idea of the evidence that's presented from officialdom, of course, is that terrorists hijacked planes on the morning of Tuesday, the 11th September 2001, and flew them into buildings, the World Trade Center's Towers 1 and 2 in New York.
And the Pentagon.
The Pentagon.
Yep.
A very low ASL. And also would turn in to try and take one. Well, there's been lots of conjecture about the places where the fourth plane was headed, but ultimately it ended up in the floor. And how it came to pass that they got access to do that, given the governmental or officialdom's explanation of how these terrorists were allowed access to fly in lessons, and the possibility that they were able to control them aircraft to do the dastardly deed in the first place, maybe,
Which is where all the theories about the CIA's involvement come in, isn't it? Because I think there's such an extent of disbelief that they could have allowed this to happen.
Well, wasn't one of the flight schools actually ran by one of the CIA Contra rebel aircraft pilots or something, who was doing the flights over to South America?
Yep.
And I think there is a case as well which said that for some strange reason, if you look at the actual visa applications for the terrorists themselves, if it would have been done properly, there's not a cat in hell's chance that those people would have been in the country anyway.
And perhaps even more intriguingly, just before the whole events, the security chief was changed at the Twin Towers. He was ex-FBI.
Well, and who's the company that was running the security but George Bush's cousin?
Well, this is, as we'll go into it, what I've done is I've put together the sort of top 10 sort of group of conspiracy theories, and that's certainly one of them.
Yeah, and the insurance that was taken out.
Well, $500 million. I mean, this is one of the arguments that the owner of the building actually made $500 million in profit.
And he wanted more because he said it had been hit twice, so he wanted double the money. I mean, come on. I mean, we're talking shocking here about being possibly irreverent in discussing things like that, but surely if somebody's out to make a profit on what happened that day, I'm sure that's a lot more irreverent than what we're doing at the moment.
Well, I was going to say, I think the one thing that we need to say is, as hopefully thinking people, the one thing we're not trying to do is make light entertainment out of something, but we're trying to commemorate 2,996 lives that were lost.
At the end of the day, I'm married to a girl from New York City.
Yeah.
My wife's from New York, and obviously it didn't just have an impact on the residents of New York. Beyond the US, the highest number of deaths because of the 9/11 attacks was the UK, and then other countries afterwards. There were lots of nations that were affected by the 9/11 attacks on the day. Lots of people lost loved ones, and it changed air travel forever, for the good or the bad, we don't know, but yet anyway, but it changed air travel forever. It practically killed Concorde, really, because the main business of Concorde was commuters from London really to New York. I suppose that's another conspiracy theory in its own right, but it's out there, and it's not about being irreverent, in my opinion. I see it more as being everybody deserves the truth, whatever that truth is. The people deserve to know, everybody deserves to know, because the knock-on effects of 9/11, the connotations of the alleged terrorist attacks on that day, we are all living through on a daily basis. Every time we see caskets containing the remains of young soldiers coming back from the Middle East. So it's important that the truth is known. It's important that the memory of the people that died on that day is respected.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's like you're saying, it's a knock-on effect from then to now. It does need to come out, but they're unlikely to, because if it does turn out that the American government was complicit in any of this, can you imagine what would happen?
Well, I think a lot of people, it's the difficult barrier for a lot of people is obviously because your life revolves around your immediate little environment for the most part. The greater powers look after the running of everything else, and everybody understands that, takes that into account, and thinks, for the most part, that their little bit of involvement is voting, put these people in power, and then the rest of the work will be done for them. The rest of the work will be looked after by the people that they trust. So the people inevitably trust the government. It's being able to get past the barrier of believing, however outrageous it might seem, that the government is capable of actions that are detrimental to the society that they're supposed to be looking after.
The thing is, though, I mean,
people can get over that hurdle.
It has been proven, though, that a government would be willing to sacrifice its own people, its own soldiers. Going back to a project, was it Operation Northwoods at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, because they wanted to get the American public on board to actually go to war against the Cubans, and it wasn't that long after Korea, and people said, we've had enough of war. We don't need this. To try and yock up some, the public to do this, they were planning to either blow up a civilian aircraft, sink a naval vessel full of people, and then blame it on the Cubans and say, we need to go to war. So, I mean, that in itself, just at that point in time, was enough to say that the government for the United States of America was willing to kill its own people, its own civilians, its own soldiers, to further a point and to go to war to suit its own purposes.
Of course, this is nothing new, because if you think about that, one of the, looking into the conspiracy theory thing, one of the great group of conspiracy theories is prior knowledge, and one of the conspiracy theories is actually about Pearl Harbor, where it's obviously said that
the president knew about it.
The president knew precisely what was going to happen,
and he just needed it to happen so the Americans would go to war.
Well, the Japanese ambassador was making noises about it well before December 1941.
Yeah,
correct. So
the Japanese needed oil for their war machine to perpetuate their empire. Imperial Japan didn't have the oil field, so it might have had the manpower and the land when it went into Burma and Indochina and all the rest of it, but it still needed oil. The biggest threat to the Japanese was the American fleet in the Pacific Ocean,
Yeah,
and
that's a blockade.
I don't think any government around the world is incapable of doing anything
They're not, and I think the added complexity here with the American government is the military-industrial complex thing, because there's a great deal of connectivity, there's a great deal of connection between people like Dick Cheney and the Bushes, who are oil and military people. There's an added layer here with the American government.
There's money to be made.
It takes a billionaire to get into the White House very often, like the Bushes. I mean, they're not there because of their intellectual finesse, are they? They're there because of
not really, to be honest. I mean, I think we've proved, well, I won't say we've proven, but we've certainly shown a point that there is things which was pushed to one side, like Dave was saying before, about how did these terrorists manage to get into the aircraft in the first place. We've also said that the American government themselves are capable, as is any other government, of doing what they want within regards of the population, civilian soldiers or whatever, if they believe they can get something out of it. Now, these rumours flying about that out of those so-called 19 terrorists which are supposed to have gone on the planes that day, some of them are actually still alive. That again, it's another rumour. I must admit, I've not totally investigated it fully to find out what's true and what isn't. But I mean, if that is the case, what was happening with people just pulling names up out of the air and saying, there you go, that's a known terrorist, they were on the aircraft. That's an easy way of sort of fueling the public into believing something again. I mean, we'll probably come to this a little bit later on, but there's also the inconsistencies as well in regards of these so-called phone calls which were made from the aircraft as well, which on the surface of it, if you actually read the transcripts and that, do look very staged in a way, and very Hollywood, but that's America for you, isn't it?
Yeah,
at times.
Can I just say something, Steve?
Yeah.
Going back to something that you said a moment ago about the alleged terrorists, there's rumours going about that they're still alive. In a way, I think it's funny that that's contra-indicative of another conspiracy theory, in so much as, they never existed, they were made-up people, they can't still be alive if they don't exist.
Yeah,
true. There's all sorts of contra-arguments for the conspiracy theories from other conspiracy theories.
Yeah, this is the thing, it's wheels within wheels.
Disinformation from the people that are trying to sort out the disinformation.
This is another problem I have with conspiracy theories very often, because there are so many, they can actually be used against the very people who are making accusations of the government, because as we all know, you'll know this better than anybody, Dave, that there's a genuine core, there's a genuine residuum of real evidence and real investigations to be made, and then what very often happens is that they use it's
the disinformation side of it what gets thrown.
We're talking about the wheat and the chaff. They'll throw the chaff in the air and then actually try and obscure the truth with it.
When we get around to actually looking at the Twin Towers and how they fell and stuff like that, and we talk about some of the scientific side of it, where the National Institute of Science and Technology falsified quite a lot of their data by the computer simulations, by doubling up some of the figures on it and cutting some of the others, just so that their computer model would work. And then it was proven, I would say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, by actual structural analysts and metallurgists and lots of people who were top of the field and said, this is absolute nonsense. The fact that those people have come out and said it will mean nothing because of the rubbish what's been thrown about it, like holographic aircraft and stuff, because people are going to think, well, if you're capable of saying that, then the rest of it must all be rubbish as well. But like I said, wheat from chaff. It's the same with anything. We've done it ourselves with UFO investigations, with paranormal investigations. You'll get somebody who is absolutely genuine with a sighting, tell you everything about it, and then you get the other one who's obviously out for a quick buck, wants to get on TV, a quick deal with a book or something. We know ourselves how it works.
Absolutely, and I think going back to where it all started, if you like, the crux of the arguments, pretty much for and against, is the terrorists flying the planes in the first place.
Yeah.
And the sheer amount of commercial pilots who they wouldn't be capable of doing it themselves, the manoeuvres that were required, especially the one who smashed the plane into the front of the Pentagon.
Yeah, that's
managed to bypass the highest security military installation in the world, and no cameras caught a plane flying into the Pentagon. There's little bits of snippets from a car park security camera, which is like a 3D slideshow lagfest.
Yeah.
Where you sort of see a little bit of an explosion, but nothing actually going in.
Yeah.
But yet, obviously, at New York, they've got, multiple angles from all over the place and all the rest of it. But the sheer lack of commercial pilots that say that they could pull them manoeuvres off themselves after logging thousands upon thousands of hours, flying Airbuses, flying 777s and 767s. And that has to be called into question. The skills that are required to be able to pilot the aircraft to them extremes on a one-shot, you don't get a second chance at this, and they pulled it off. First time, bang. Second time, and third time. There was no training that could get you to that kind of skill level.
Well, there's a gentleman who's a pilot who shows up on documentaries. I forget his name, and he's had like 30 years experience as a pilot in the United States Air Force and as a commercial pilot. And he said there's absolutely no way that anybody could pull a manoeuvre like that. He said he certainly couldn't in all the years that he's done it.
Saying, didn't he, our Mr. Loeb in the US, he said it's just not possible.
Yeah.
And he's flown all sorts of things, from private jets, commercial jets, to high-powered military jet aircraft, turboprops, you name it.
I mean, there's contradicting evidence as well. I mean, I know we're talking about the Pentagon at the moment, of people who said that as the explosion actually occurred, they saw an aircraft pulling away from the Pentagon as well. So what was that? Was that some kind of plane delivering a missile, or was the plane a cover for a drone of some kind? Again, I don't know. I'm playing devil's advocate. I suppose I am on the side of the conspiracy theory by looking at the other things which has been seen as well. I mean, they're going on as well saying that, the hole which was in the Pentagon was only 5 metres wide because it was the fuselage that went through. The plane's wings vaporised along with the engines on the impacts of it. I mean, them engines are made from tungsten, which don't burn even, something like 3,000 degrees or something ridiculous like that. So what's happened, because some people are saying the plane came in, it hit on its side, one of the wings slewed off and then it disintegrated. But if that's the case, how did it manage to fly so much in a straight line to go through the side of the Pentagon, which didn't even have any of the military personnel in there? It was a side of it which was still actually being done up. It just seems wrong, because the plane, they say it was this absolutely amazing manoeuvre. It was heading to one side, then did this, was it a barrel roll or something, and went round to the other. What's going on?
You would also expect the fact that when the plane hits the building, of course, there's resistance, isn't there? Of course, there's a lot of force given the speed of the aircraft, which to just annihilate itself, or like you say, the wings vaporising and the fuselage just crumpling as it's forcing an impact through the building at a parallel level to the ground, to be able to do that kind of damage. You would expect the building, if it came in at an angle, to drive the tail in when it's going in towards the floor to cause a furrow as it travels forward under the momentum of the impact.
But the thing is, even so, that those engines which are sort of built to withstand all sorts, they would have been thrown forward. You would have had 2 holes in the building at the side of that main hole, and it wasn't.
And I don't think they would have been exactly spaced apart like they would if the aircraft.
No, it would have been.
Obviously, as the wings fold back, they would come in towards the direction of the fuselage and fly from the building. But there is, however, there's plenty of photographs and video footage of the lights in the nearby car park just opposite where the gas station was, what captured the 3D slideshow lagfest that I was referring to before, where the tops of these lampposts have been clipped and smashed and bent over, and they flew across and smashed into a taxi, where the taxi driver is one of the witnesses who said that he did see a plane hit the Pentagon. And the other drivers have stopped because there's the top of a street line across the carriageway and what have you. So there is that kind of thing. People have seen it. There's debris on the floor of it.
But there's not that much debris, is there? I mean, look at the Lockerbie crash and how it was strewn all over the place, and yet something is like at the side of a building, and you got a few bits here and there, and within, what was it, half an hour, they turned up and just put sand over everything.
But
doesn't make sense.
Of course, you've got that exploding in the air, so the debris got the force of the explosion forcing it outwards. It's going to scatter over a wider area as it drops under gravity anyway. But I do see your point.
But even if you look at the front of the building, where the explosion would have been, and the fireball, this in certain photographs, you can see like what do they call them? Oh God, filing cabinets open with bits of paper hanging out, not even a light. So it doesn't make any sense.
That brings into question other artefacts that were found around the ground zero of the World Trade Center as well. That we'll probably cover later.
Yeah. So as we can see, as we're sort of discussing here, there really is quite a potpourri of things which don't quite add up. And even if you look at the official story and the so-called scientific side of it, if you look at the science in itself, it still doesn't quite add up.
I think one thing that's not refutable is the fact that there are people out there that have come forward and have lost loved ones that were in the Pentagon at the time, and that there are medical examiners, forensic pathologists that had to identify the bodies and body parts and the charred remains of victims that were at the Pentagon and, of course, the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
But as covering the Pentagon, I'm referring to the ones from the Pentagon. They've obviously signed affidavits, and as far as conspiracy theorists are concerned, and for that matter, anybody who's involved in an investigative type of bent, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's easy to write down this and it's easy to write down that, but there's a lot of people out there that say they were there, tried to administer first aid and all the rest of it, and that can't be. People died there, and there was an explosion at the Pentagon. I don't think that's.
No, it's what did explode. That's what we have to ask the question of.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because obviously the level of exposure and coverage between the two incidents there's a massive disparity. Everybody associates 9/11 with the Twin Towers.
It still doesn't make any sense, because was it something like 24 minutes after the Twin Towers were hit? Was it the Pentagon or something?
Yeah.
If that's the case, and them aircraft are up there,
24 minutes is a long time,
and the Pentagon is supposedly one of the non-flyover places.
Well, as Dave said, it's supposedly one of the most secure facilities.
You've got an airbase nearby where they wouldn't scramble any aircraft. Something again doesn't add up.
There was F-16s already in the air. This patrols, obviously air defence patrols constantly, I think, and people that don't realise that, even over here in the UK, we're not just left to it. There are patrols, there are aircraft up there. The skies are continuously monitored.
Well, I
think
the year before they'd scrambled over 1,000 aircraft or something just to be on the safe side of stuff. Yet on the day when real crap was happening, nish.
On the day that they were conducting an exercise where they were under attack for terrorists via plane hijackers,
So you've got planes in the air, something happening, so you've already got the planes up there, so why then would you order either the aircraft to A, stand down, or B, you turn around and say, well, I'll tell you what, go and fly towards it, but no afterburners, and you can only fly at half power.
Yeah, it's NORAD and there's to sit idly by when the air traffic was there and all this. There's recordings of all this going on.
Yeah.
Obviously, to sort of like lean towards Nodge's take, there was a lot of confusion on the day.
Yeah.
There was a lot of confusion. I mean, obviously, most of the repeaters are radio repeater, which accepts an incoming radio signal, boosts it, and then sends it out for the emergency services. Like emergency firefighters, of course. You've got the police, the Port Authority Department, lots of different emergency services that were at New York. That was located on the top of World Trade Center Tower 1.
Yeah. So when that was taken out, that was obviously going to cause all sorts of problems.
So there was all sorts of problems, obviously, on the event, after the event. The telephone lines were completely clogged with lots of calls coming in and all the rest of it. So you can understand that pandemonium reigned. However, it would have been notified very, very, very early on that obviously aircraft give out squawk codes.
Yep. And there was no coding given out for a hijack either, which was quite odd.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's another thing. So as soon as it left its flight pattern, it would have flagged to the nearest radar that would be relevant to pass it over to whichever sector for the airport it was headed to. It would have flagged that it was off course, or it would have flagged that it was at the wrong level, at the wrong height, and tried to be contacted.
Yeah.
Now, were they not made aware that something was going wrong because the comms were on in the cockpit and it was a transmission that wasn't meant to be made?
The interesting, I mean, you know about radio, you know how things like that work. Now I'm going to ask you something, because there's a website, it's called Pilots for 9/11 Truth, I think it's called, and there's some pilots there who are actually saying that they've managed to get hold of some flight tapes and some documentation and also some audio, which show the transponders for the aircraft still to be around after the planes had crashed into the towers. Is that possible?
Well, as far as I was aware, the transponders are battery operated, and of course they're sending out a beacon. I'm not exactly sure which frequency they're sending out this beacon, but if it's still got the power to be able to do it, and via direction finding, where you only really need 2 points where you can cross-reference it on a grid. I'm not going to go into the logistics of it, but you can, what's called DF, direction find a radio signal.
Yeah.
Radio waves propagate in vertical lines. So they would be able to pinpoint where the signal were coming from precisely to an exact point. And I don't just mean to within a few feet, I mean exactly to an exact point. So, it's completely possible.
Right, well, I may be wrong, and I may have read it wrong, and I'm going to have to check it all out. But, according to what I just said about I'm still finding these things allegedly still flying, that's basically it. They were flying, they weren't near the Twin Towers.
As far as I know, if the transponders, once a direct, as soon as the aircraft smashed into the side of a building, the transponder should be dead.
Yeah. I mean,
if the plane loses any type of power, internal power, there's a battery backup for the transponder.
Yeah.
So that the aircraft will still squawk its position to the nearest radar or ATC.
But as you say, strange things happen once an aircraft hits a building at 600 miles an hour, and things should really just stop.
Should be obliterated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I would have to check this and make sure they got the story right. And anybody else, if you're listening, just have a look at, I think it's Pilots for 9/11 Truth. I'm sure it actually says on there that when the towers were hit, there's still transponders showing that the planes were somewhere else. So I could be wrong. Because it was one of them things where it was watching something about 3 o'clock in the morning, so you don't entirely take it all in.
See, my take on this is that these are legitimate lines of enquiry that are based very much on physical and the flight data.
Yeah.
And I don't think those data have ever actually been interrogated properly. Some of the stuff I'm going to be going through, actually, in nearly all of these, the top 10 conspiracy theories in the media that I've sort of highlighted that I'm going to be going through, none of them actually relate to this. This is the hardcore stuff. And my argument is that all the stuff I'm going to be just going through very briefly actually detracts from the debate that you're having now, which is actually to look properly at the flight data and what happened. Well, the other thing to say is that there's an old military saying, and one of the reasons that we might conjecture about whether or not the aircraft were shot down at particular positions and why the F-16s did what they did, there's an old military saying that says no strategy survives contact with the enemy. Sometimes military personnel are human beings, and sometimes they're caught on the horns of a dilemma, and they don't know whether or not, if they shoot an aircraft down and it's above a residential area, what damage will it do?
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Exactly. If it's on course for a military building that's well defended, is there an advantage, if you like, in very callous terms, in letting it hit the building rather than have it crash over a residential area that contains 200,000 people?
Yeah.
I find it difficult to believe that they didn't have anything in play to address that kind of scenario.
Agreed.
Given that on the very morning they were running
that kind of procedure as a
the exercises, practice all that very thing.
Some very strange things went on in the weeks prior to 9/11. And I'm not just talking about just the sort of changes in personnel and the fact that the building had changed hands of Twin Towers and all that stuff. That happens in finance, as we all know. But the fact of the matter is that things were changing economically for the United States at that time, and a lot of 9/11 is about economics because, of course, as we all know, there was a lot of negative betting went on in the markets prior to 9/11.
Stock market for aircraft and that.
A lot of people got rich on hedging the bets against the US economy, carrying on the way it was, and of course it crashed after 9/11, and a lot of people bet correctly, including Al Qaeda. Some of the people that backed the countervailing argument about markets being stable made a lot of money out of it.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to play another record in a second. Before I do, I just want to ask one thing of the pair of you. You know about the black boxes, the flight recorders. Apparently, according to the official records, no flight recorders have been found in either the planes that hit the Twin Towers or the one that hit the Pentagon.
Really?
Now, there's a gentleman who works for the I can't forget the name of the agency. So, do like the flight investigations when there's been a crash, and he has said that it is only very, very in rare occasions that they will not find the flight recorder.
The black box is supposed to be the toughest thing on board a craft, isn't it? Is that right, Dave?
It is, it's also more often than not located in the tail for that very reason.
So if one was to not be missing, you'd say, well, that's so much hard luck because that's probably one of the cases. But three, that's sort of pulling it a little bit. That 4, sorry, four. Keep forgetting the Pennsylvania one. I apologise for that. Thank you for that. But doesn't it sort of strike you odd that 4 flight recorders on that day go missing?
Well, there's that. It's whether or not you could find them. But the more disturbing question.
Well, if you can find.
The more disturbing question is if somebody did locate them. Where did they take them? What did they do with them? And where's the evidence?
Rumours have it that there are CIA personnel who did find them, but you've got to ask yourself if they can find the paper passport of a so-called terrorist nearby, which why on earth would somebody be taking a passport on an internal flight for anyway?
Let's be honest.
So if they can find that, and that's not so indestructible, why could they not find the black boxes? Seems a little bit odd to me. So we're going to play a record. If you're out there, give us a shout on tachyonradio.com. You can give us a text on the phone, and that's 07463639815. Of course, you can always go to tachyonradio.com. There are methods of getting in touch with us there, or you can go to our Facebook page and drop us a line on there with a message. Going to be back to Dave shortly, if that's okay with you, Dave.
No problem.
And I'll tell you what, and I know both of you like this band, so I'm going to play it just for the hell of it. This is Pink Floyd and Run Like Hell.
Oh, yeah.
Indeed.
Oh, nice one. Did you enjoy that one?
I did, yes. It makes a nice change for somebody to play a track off the album The Wall, which isn't Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. So.
Yeah, that's very true, that, isn't it? It's very true.
I'm tipping my virtual cap to you here, Steve.
No problem at all. Well, we both know here that, there are more songs than that on that album.
And a belated happy 72nd birthday to Roger Waters.
Roger Waters, the other day, wasn't it?
Can't believe that my heroes are in the 70s. It's frightening.
I'm not that far off, mate.
Well, no, I was going to say, no, I'm not that far off him myself. I can't believe I'm the age I am.
Okay, then before we go any further, Nodgy's going to give us some of his top 10 conspiracy theories.
Well, I've been through the sort of the major conspiracy theories that seem to make the news, rather than all the stuff we've just been talking about, which is actually, about engineering and aircraft and actual trajectories and fact rather than conjecture. And number 10 is robbery. Now, COMEX was believed to have had about $950 million worth of gold under the World Trade Center prior to the attack. And only 230 million is said to have been recovered, which isn't surprising when you think about it. Now, it's led some to believe that 9/11 was actually a cover-up for a massive robbery or fraud, the biggest safe-cracking ever. Now, my take on it is it's a somewhat sort of dramatic and high-profile way of, disguising a robbery, but it doesn't detract from the fact that there was $1 billion of gold in the World Trade Center that's never been thought about.
No, it was shipped off somewhere, wasn't it, earlier on?
Yeah.
It's a similar thing as well to the Pentagon as well. I had some notes somewhere and I've consequently lost everything, but there was some money, shall we say, which was something regarding money which was being checked out also at the Pentagon, and I think some people are thinking that was it that side of the Pentagon hit where all the money men were who were actually investigating.
It was the admin wing, wasn't it? I mean, this is where all the sort of the white collar, blue collar people.
Yeah, so was it a case of they were actually investigating something, and that was a way of doing it? But again, it seems quite a big thing. I honestly believe that everything that's gone on is possibly a perfect storm for a lot of things, at least of all the thing which was actually preparing the American public for a war in the Middle East. They say, you get people riled up enough, they'll follow you.
Well, I remember I don't know about you, Dave, but I remember the radio broadcasts and the TV broadcasts directly following 9/11, which was absolutely, obviously, we're all horrified with shock, but you did get a lot of knee-jerk reactions from the American public, and they were angry with anybody that they would be directed towards. Now, to me, one of the biggest conspiracies ever about 9/11 is why the US and UK armies would march into a country that had no known connection whatsoever with 9/11.
Well, that's the big thing of it, isn't it? I mean, if
that to me is the biggest theory, the biggest mystery of the lot.
If you look on the FBI website at the time, and it had Bin Laden on there, he was wanted for the terror attacks of the previous Twin Towers thing. Remember from a few years ago? But he was never indicted for the Twin Towers themselves, and when they were actually asked, they said, well, we've got no evidence.
Well, the other thing is it's also based on an ignorance, our ignorance, a Western ignorance of the way the Middle East works. Osama bin Laden was hated by Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was a secular leader. He may not have been a good man, and the regime he led may not have been a good regime, but the fact of the matter is Saddam Hussein was not a religious zealot.
No.
He was a secular leader in the tinderbox of the Middle East. So
he also provided stability in the Middle East, whether people admit it or not.
Well, he did. I mean, to be honest, Iraq itself is an artificial construct by the British and American forces after the Second World War. So, in a way,
as is Pakistan.
Well, as there are a lot of countries absolutely, as there are a lot of countries in that neck of the woods, and the fact of the matter is that to blindly go marching into a country where I think that the leaders knew that there was no connectivity whatsoever between Saddam Hussein, his regime, and 9/11.
That's why we had to have the lie of weapons of mass destruction, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's also the thing about David Kelly, the weapons expert. I actually know his sister.
Yeah.
And I know that they never believed, nor do I believe what happened to Dr. Kelly, because I think it's a travesty and a sham and disrespectful to the man's memory that they should actually say he took his own life. I don't believe that, and I don't believe anybody else does either.
I never forget years ago when we were kids, and I remember coming round to your house one night and said, it's kicking off in Afghanistan, there's going to be absolute trouble there. And it all stems from that, because
it does.
It was, it was the Americans, they actually got the Taliban up and running, give them money, give them arms, because they wanted them to fight against the Russians.
These unstable areas on the face of the... I mean, everything is linked to politics. And the fact of the matter is...
Mujahideen as...
Well, absolutely, and the fact that, my enemy's enemy.
Like that, we're fighting the Taliban,
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, there's the old adage of my enemy's enemy is also my friend. And the Americans have always sort of clung to this maxim, which, despite it being a Russian theory, is actually one of their favourite military sort of tactics. But the fact of the matter is, Afghanistan is twice the size of France, and no standing army whatsoever, the British, the French, the Russians, nobody have ever quelled Afghanistan. Wherever there's an invasion or unrest in Afghanistan, trouble follows.
And didn't they say at the time, is it possible for this guy to plan in such meticulous content of everything that went on that day in the ways that it was done from a cave in Afghanistan?
Absolutely. Tora.
Yeah.
Bora.
Hagiba.
You made earlier nudge about one of the conspiracy theories being about a robbery is probably one of the biggest insulting.
I was going to ask you about that, Dave, what your take was. I'm interested to know what you think.
I think that's an atrocious conspiracy theory.
I agree. This is why I've listed them. I've not listed any conspiracy theories. I think hold water. But this is. I agree. I think it's insulting.
Yeah.
That is a bad one. You know, it's beneath the bottom of the barrel to think that it would be
is.
For that.
It is, you're absolutely right, and the reason I've listed them is because these are amongst the ones that, according to polls, are the most believed by the American public.
Terrible.
Yeah, and actually I'm starting backwards. So it gets worse, because as I get to number one, I don't want to sort of break the tension, but
I'll have to get that due.
But the problem is, what I've done is I based it on the statistical feedback that they've had in the American media. As we get towards the top, more and more of the American public believe them. I think they get more and more silly.
What gets me is the fact that so soon after the attacks, they knew exactly who was behind it. As far as the government were concerned, in the eyes of the public, don't worry, people, we
know.
It was in minutes, wasn't it, really, that they bunged it all out?
Yeah.
As George Bush said, you know, we will get the people who knock those buildings down.
The thing is,
that's the way they were on it, you know, they knew exactly where to go.
Yeah.
Both the US and the UK already had the logistics in play to put boots on the ground in Afghanistan.
Well, there's no doubt whatsoever that they already knew what they were going to do, despite the fact that there was very, very sketchy evidence about who had actually perpetrated these horrific acts.
Boots on the ground in Afghanistan in October 2001.
Yeah.
The thing
2 years before the invasion of Iraq.
Well, as the three of us know, you do not mobilise an army on the click of a finger.
No, it takes a lot of planning.
You know, an army is essentially it's an act of logistics, isn't it?
Well, it wasn't only that.
It's a chain, isn't
everything that went in it, because didn't it become like, was it shock and awe what came after it? And it wasn't so much then an article of war or an act of war. It became a TV show.
It was about a project, and it was about George W. Bush actually getting revenge for his father and being able to say mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Actually, what you've got is one of the most inept and stupid presidents in the Americans' history.
What I find, and I may be wrong, but I mean, I'm sure I've heard this somewhere, but Al Qaeda didn't exist until that very day of 9/11.
Well, it
was a name that came out.
I think we all know that you find in this sort of, with this sort of terrorism, it's not about numbers, it's about ideas.
Yeah.
Which is why they attacked the World Trade Center. The theory, if you like, behind what you want to call Islamist terrorism is about hitting symbols.
Yeah.
And of course, as we all know,
the biggest symbol of
the Pentagon and the Twin Towers are not just about the buildings, they're about what they represent.
Pentagon for the military might, and the Twin Towers for the money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Of course, and the government know that. Government know that as well, that the American public, the international community, also see them buildings and them centres as being representative of American culture, American power, of what the West represents. So, you know, they can play it against themselves, so to speak.
Absolutely. It'd be a bit like somebody, you know, knocking down the Tower of Westminster or Big Ben or the Houses of Parliament or Buckingham Palace.
I must admit, when that did happen, I mean, a mate of mine, Jeff, phoned me up actually on that day and said, a plane's hit the Twin Towers. I automatically thought it was a Cessna, you know, some little plane like that. When I turned on Sky News and saw it was a little bit different, I thought, that's a little bit odd. And of course, when the second one hit, that was it. I knew then that, you know,
it wasn't.
That crap had finally hit the fan. The strange thing is, I always kick myself for this. When I moved home, I actually had a set of tapes on the day of 9/11 when it was happening. I thought, this is history. And I recorded everything, what happened through the day, because it was a direct feed from, I think it was CNN or Fox, sent through to Sky News. And I'm sure that they reported that there was another plane that had gone missing. And then that was the last it was ever reported of it. And I often wondered if that was the case, that some of these so-called conspiracy theories are saying that the planes were landed elsewhere, the passengers were taken off. Perhaps that was the one which was shot down over Pennsylvania to get rid of the people who would be the evidence, so to speak. Would that have been the missing aircraft, which was allegedly then to put everybody else in place? And I just wish I still had that them set of tapes, but when I moved, it was like, oh, videotapes, don't need them anymore, and I just dumped them, and I never even thought.
I remember them early broadcasts of which you're referring to, Steve, and when they were talking to people, the initial witnesses, if you like, all of them described what looked like a missile hitting the building. Yeah. A missile, not a plane.
Yeah.
Not a plane. All the initial reports that came in were of a missile.
To be honest, though, I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but the problem is, it's such a shockingly unusual thing, and the fact of the matter is we're not used to seeing planes used in that context.
No.
A plane is a missile.
It is,
at 600 miles an hour. Of course, it's slowing down over cities and so on. Because you see something out of context, it makes you wonder whether or not they're just, the minds are filled in the blanks.
You see this again.
They can't have the cake and eat it, though, because they're using witnesses again to validate their description.
Yeah, absolutely.
They saw planes.
Yeah.
So, you can't have people that are not able to distinguish a missile from a plane. Anything that goes through the air and hits an object can be defined as a missile.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the video,
you can't use that same people later on or other people and say, no, we back up the government because we definitely saw a commercial plane hit that building.
Well, this is it, isn't it?
Or they don't,
You look at the video footage and it was definitely planes that hit the buildings. But then you look at some of the descriptions that people are giving. There was people who were quite close to it saying, the plane came whizzing in. It wasn't a commercial aircraft, though, because the windows appeared to be blacked out. It didn't look as though it had the livery on it of American Airlines or whichever airline it was. It was like a brownie colour.
Itself shows that the planes look just silver.
Yeah.
The other problem is, of course, that it only becomes apparent after the fact. So, in other words, the reportage, especially with the Twin Towers, happened after as the buildings were hit. We don't know what went on. I mean, you hear it said that the Twin Towers were hit by planes. Of course, we know that, but we don't know what else they may have been hit by.
No, I mean, you start talking, that'll be something which we will cover in the demolition, if that's the word you want to use, of the Twin Towers, because it's all a case of there's no way that a building is going to drop like that. It's as simple as that, unless it's a controlled demolition. It's been proven by the time it took for them to drop that it was in a case of free fall. Pardon?
It fell into them buildings fell into their own footprint.
Straight down.
The speed of controlled descent with no resistance to the floors beneath them.
Well, this is it, isn't it? And again, it's back to what I was saying before. If one building did that, you could say, you know what, that's amazing that happened. And then a second one does it, and then a third. You've got to ask yourself, how can 3 buildings possibly do that?
And of course, bearing in mind that the Empire State Building was hit by a plane, had outrageous fires that were completely out of control, and it's still there today.
Mind you, in fairness, the architectural practices that put these buildings up are very different. The Empire State is built very much on concrete and wire, whereas of course the modern buildings like that we've got them in London, the Gherkin and the walkie-talkie, they are all essentially glass, steel.
The Twin Towers itself.
It's the only steel and concrete building ever to suffer a fire.
True.
Exactly.
That's
I mean, was it the Windsor Hotel in Madrid? Was it in 1985 or something? What suffered that massive fire?
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't completed, the building, but it burnt for, was it 20 hours?
The Joelma building in the early 1970s in Brazil.
Yeah. And yet the main structure stayed standing. Okay, some of the floors collapsed.
I think there was one in Thailand in 2006 as well.
Yeah, but if you look at the pictures of these places burning, they've got white hot flame because there's lots and lots of oxygen there, which allows the flames to burn, so the temperatures are higher. If you look at the actual Twin Towers when they were on fire, it's dark smoke, it's red, like a deep red colour of the flames. It's starved of oxygen. They probably wouldn't even been burning up to something like, say, 500 degrees, from the burn off from the fuel. Now it's going to take at least 1700 degrees to melt the steel So
with the initial impact of that, Steve, as you're describing there, for the size of the explosion that you see, for the size of the explosions that you see from the impact of the planes at World Trade Center, the fireball that didn't just erupt on the outside of the building. This fireball flew to the inside of the building. It flew down elevator shafts and come out the concourse in the ground floor. You know, it was the force of the energy of that impact was exasperated throughout the entire building. We're led to believe. Now that aviation fuel would have burnt within milliseconds.
Yeah, because it's only got a low burning point,
and a lot lower than the threshold which is needed to melt steel.
Yep.
Now the inner furnishings of the Twin Towers, they would have been vaporised. We'll ignore all the papers that were lying all over the floor that were completely intact, and passports and all the rest of it. We won't go into that.
Yeah.
But the amount of furnishings that were inside were also capable of burning well sub 2,000 degrees, which is necessary to create molten steel.
Which nothing would have been approaching them temperatures unless we start going then down the realms of military grade thermite, thermate, which would do it, which is used in, as we know, demolition of buildings, which brings us back.
Molecules of thermite were found in the dust at the ground zero.
Yeah. So, we started this show sort of thinking, is it conspiratorial, or now are we looking at actual evidence to look at it and say, perhaps not so much a conspiracy, but perhaps we've been misled.
Well, you see, this is my argument. My argument is there's a difference altogether between what you would call a wacko-jacko conspiracy theory, another one which I'm about to go into in a few minutes, and actual evidence-based arguments for a particular course of events.
Yeah. So there's so much what went on around the flights hitting the Twin Towers that you do literally have to step back and start asking serious questions. Okay, the big one for me, I mean, the towers were hit. Now, George Bush, he was asked by the 9/11 Commission, when was it that, he knew that, the towers had been hit. And he said he saw the first one hit on television. Now, that's pretty much impossible because the footage of the towers being hit, I think there's 3 pieces of footage available. The first one, which is always shown, is the one which was in the documentary done by, was it the Nordet brothers, about the fire department?
Along with the firefighters.
Yeah. That wasn't shown until the following day. So if George Bush has seen the first tower being hit on TV, is that some kind of closed-circuit television which is monitoring what's going to possibly happen, and therefore he actually seen it? Because there's not
as far as I'm aware, Steve, as far as I'm aware of the 3 different videos which show the impact of the first plane on World Trade Center 1, all of them only come to light after 9/11.
It was the following day that he was shown on the news. So if he saw that first flight hitting before anybody else did, then it's got to be some kind of closed-circuit TV system that was monitoring the building because it knew something was going to happen. If that's the case, and he has testified to that, then the conspiracy theories is no longer a conspiracy.
You've also got to take into account that when he was in front of a media gathering later that day, he slips up, or it seems that he's slipping up, because he says when that plane hit the World Trade Center, and he says it 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, you could put that down to shock, but again, it's something. I mean, it's the same with the bit when he's in, with the kids, and they're giving him that book about a goat to read or something. Yeah. I mean, when that guy comes in and whispers in his ear and says, the other tower's been hit, it's a good 7 minutes till he actually decides to get up and go out.
And there's also, if you remember the footage, there's no reactions.
No.
I know the man is not perhaps the most adept.
No, but
guy,
you'd have something,
you would
wouldn't you?
Expect some form of reaction even from a guy like that.
His official outline of that thing there was that when he was told by, I don't know the guy's name, who it was, who came in, he said, within seconds I got up and went out to check it. No, he didn't. I mean, it's there. It's a good 7 minutes before he does anything. So, I mean, he's lying straight away, even knowing that the proof is there.
Well, I've got a number of American friends who all feel that Cheney was involved. I mean, I think the feeling obviously is that Cheney was actually running that particular administration.
There's so much that went on that day that all the hierarchy, I believe, of the American government at that time had a hand in it. I mean, on the day itself, all the ones who could have actually done something were elsewhere around the country doing something else.
Absolutely.
The president, something happens where there's a possibility that a massive terrorist attack is going to happen on American soil, and yet nobody sort of does, like, oh, let's grab him and take him to a safe place. He's still in a building full of kids reading a book about a goat. The first thing what the security services do is the possible danger to the president to get him in a car and off to a safe place.
Absolutely.
So if they didn't do that, then they must know that the president wasn't in any immediate danger. Again, is that a case of that there's no longer a conspiracy? It's just yet another theory.
I think the argument for the establishment where that's concerned is that it wasn't so much that Bush was in shock, it was that there wasn't anything that could be done anyway. And the Office of Emergency Management, which was being led by Rudolph Giuliani, who was the mayor of New York at the time, he was instigating the measures necessary to deal with the then attacks on the World Trade Center, because the Pittsburgh hadn't come to light when Bush was informed about the plane hitting the World Trade Center and night for the attack on the Pentagon. So the actions of emergency management were left to Rudolph Giuliani, whose offices were in World Trade Center 7, by the way. Which later fell down, even though it wasn't struck by anything.
And the BBC reported about 20 minutes earlier that it fell down.
The CIA also had an office in one of the buildings as well, and that was one of
the interesting thing is
one of the conspiracy theories.
Apparently, I mean, I say again, I don't know the truth behind it. Something that needs further research is that one of the actual buildings in there, the offices in there, was also controlled by the NSA, and that building itself, or should I say, the section of offices, dealt with remotely piloting aircraft. So, I mean, what's the best way of covering up anything but getting rid of the evidence?
And what a better place to get your military explosive drones from.
Exactly. I mean,
if you're going down that route,
I mean, there's some pictures of girders on Ground Zero, and if you look at the girders, they've got that angled. It looks like an angled cut, which is what they use for thermal.
Cut with an angle grinder.
And it's typical that for demolitions.
It's a laser thermite charge, isn't it? That is set around it. It cuts it at an angle for a controlled air drop.
I think
steel girders and steel buildings.
But the way that they've investigated the actual thermite in the dust, it looks like it's military grade, which is thermate because it adds, I forgot what the name of the chemical. They add sulphur to it, and they add, there's another chemical that they add to it, which makes it burn quicker. So you get
a cleaner, faster explosion, isn't it?
So there's definitely something which is going on, and it's definitely something which is also slightly amiss, and yet we're still being fed this story of like, oh no, everything's okay. It's just happened like that on the day. It might look odd, but it's not, honestly.
Everything, the biggest attack on US soil in history. After, of course, the attack on Pearl Harbor, and all the evidence was gone within days. It's the main bits of evidence that they put forward was alleged landing gear, engine, bits of aircraft, fuselage wreckage on the streets like Liberty Street and West Street, and downtown Manhattan and what have you. And then, of course, after the event, as they cleaned up, obviously Ground Zero, all the concrete and all the bits of remnants are dumped in the bay.
But it shouldn't have been. That's it. It was a crime scene. Nothing should have been moved from there. No, there was stuff which was shifted from there, which was irradiated. How on earth can a building fall down and create radiation? There was fires burning underground for days after it. What would do that? Why would that happen to the temperatures that it got? If it was just a building that fell down, it was a goddamn crime scene. Why were they allowed to move all this stuff off, to melt it down, to sell it off abroad, to dump it in the river, in the ocean, or wherever? Why were they allowed to do it at a crime scene? If somebody was killed out in the streets, What's the first thing they do? They come along, they cordon off, they get all the evidence together so they can build a case. When something happened at 9/11 and then buildings came down, that was a crime scene. All the information was there, what they would have needed to get together to find out what was going on. So why on earth was it not treated like a crime scene and just literally, it was raped, the area was raped and everything was took out of there?
Satellite imagery was showing heat signatures from Ground Zero still in December of 2001.
That's just ridiculous. How can that happen? You can't say there's underground fires from gas mains or anything like that, because that would have all been capped off. That is just absolutely bloody ridiculous.
For me, the old tragedy, of course, of what went on that day is the fact that the spirit, the community spirit of everybody in Manhattan, the Bronx, and from all over that kind of area, that were willing to risk life and limb in the rescue. And I use the term loosely because there was nothing that could be done, as we all know, afterwards, where Ground Zero was concerned. But that were going in there, forming these daisy chains and looking for the lost comrades, especially the fire department.
All the firefighters and
there's 343 firefighters.
There's the footage of the doctor as well, isn't there? The guy that took the video that went back in, wasn't there?
Yeah.
He was trying to see if he could help people out. And he obviously knew as a medic that there was probably very little to be done.
I know this probably doesn't sound right, but one of the saddest things I did read, like they had the dogs there looking for bodies. What they had to do, firemen had to pretend they were a body, so when the dog found them, they could sort of come to life, because the dogs were getting so despondent in finding nothing.
Yeah.
I can believe that, because the psychologist is going to the animals, of course, of where they're going. I mean, I forget the name of the police officer who was dug out the following day, but there was a few of them that got dug out and they were the last ones, weren't they?
Yeah.
There's a film made about it. I think Nicolas Cage stars as the officer in question. I think it's called World Trade Center, and the effect that it's got to have had upon the emergency services and the rescue workers, just knowing that they weren't finding bodies, they were lucky if they found body parts, because the people that were in the towers when they went down were just completely
pulverised.
They just completely dissolved. They disappeared. They went. And it's terrible. I mean, just the sheer amount of people that haven't got remains to bury.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of families out there who've still not got closure on this.
And regardless of whatever conspiracy theories are put forward, the human tragedy, the human element of it,
exactly,
is still can't be swept under the carpet. Which is why I think it's important that the truth does out.
And that's the problem. I mean, it's like I said at the start of the show, we're not taking away anything what happened with the people, the tragedy that surrounds it. We're looking at what the alternatives may be, because some of the stuff we've been fed from the official line is absolute nonsense. So much to say now that even these families who are trying to sue the government, because even they don't believe the official line now of what's actually happened either.
The problem is when you've got so much disinformation knocking about, you will get mistrust, you will get distrust, and the fact of the matter is, as we all know, a government is not one contiguous whole. There are people who tell truths in government, there are people who lie.
I hope you're not suggesting that politicians lie.
Paris, I thought...
David, how could you think that?
David, please wash your mouth out.
I know, what are you thinking?
I don't know, that's disgraceful, isn't it?
We'll just backtrack on that a little bit.
But I think the thing to say is that I've worked in government all my life, and the fact of the matter is, government, rather like the NHS or any other institution, is not a single entity. It's made up of good and bad, and I think that the further towards the top you go, unfortunately, the worse it becomes.
Well, with power comes corruption.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more.
With corruption comes greed, and it's self-reciprocating, isn't it?
I think in the American politics, where it's basically driven by money, I couldn't agree more. The fact of the matter is, Dick Cheney is a very, very unpleasant and quite an evil guy who made a lot of money out of weaponry. So nothing that man would do would surprise me. Nothing.
Okay, I'm going to play another record for us now.
Can I say hello to somebody?
Yes, of course you can.
I'd just like to say hello to my friend Sheila Hammond in America. Hiya, Sheila.
Hello, Sheila.
Hi, glad you're listening to us. And Sheila makes a very good point that she feels very, very sad still about the victims. I think everybody does.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say, well, we're having these discussions. The three of us are all mindful of that. So thanks for being with us, Sheila, and hello.
Hello, Sheila.
Yeah, we may be just three mooks from England, but yeah, we have. I think this is the reason why we are trying to do this, just to say that the official line doesn't really cut mustard.
I think Dave put his finger on it before as well. I think, we've got a natural affinity with the people of America. And I was in the pub, funnily enough, watching this.
That's not new.
Yeah. I mean, it may come as a shock to both of you, but I was...
The lying politician.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I remember I wasn't the only person crying. And I wasn't the only grown man crying, at the news.
It's an awful day.
It's hard to remember the actual shock, the sheer visceral shock of what was done that day.
Absolutely not. I think you've hit upon a really good point there, because my memory of that day is after coming out I'd gone visiting my mother's and took my son down to visit his grandma, as you do with family doings, and we couldn't believe what was going on the TV.
It was unbelievable.
Coming outside, just the shock. It was like the UK died also on that day.
I couldn't agree more.
But whether people are ready to admit that now or not, my memory of that day is that the streets were quiet. Everyone was in
I remember the same, Dave. I was in the centre of Manchester, and the centre of Manchester was quiet. Everything was subdued, and it wasn't the sort of subdued you get after the declaration of war, because you hear about the quietness in the London Underground and the German metropoles after the day that World War II was declared. It was a different sort of shock. It was a disbelief.
I remember going to pick up Becky from nursery, and I had to get on the bus because my car was in for an MOT that day, and getting a text saying the towers just fell down, it's come down. And then on the way back, getting another one saying the other tower's come down, and I'm looking at this thinking, you know what, God knows what's happening next. And I remember getting off the bus, and a plane flew overhead, and I just looked up, and I'm looking at it thinking, don't blow up. Don't blow up. I mean, how stupid is that? But that was it.
And of course,
the thoughts were mirrored by a lot of people.
I agree. I think that's right. And of course, that is the whole point of terrorism. No matter what flavour it may be,
plays on your mind.
It's about what happened after 9/11. Everybody who travelled by plane was actually inconvenienced, and to this day, it's going through an airport now. It's not a pleasant experience. No. There's always that's doubt in everybody's mind that travels by plane now, that it somehow there's an inherent danger.
There's always something at the back of your mind, isn't there?
Yeah.
Right, okay then, so I'm going to play us a little track, and we'll be back. Are you alright for a few minutes, Dave?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and you were mentioning before about the Twin Towers coming down at the speed with no resistance, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to play our next track for us, and it's going to be Tom Petty with Free Falling. Just 1 second. Sheila's one said, thanks and hi to all the guys. Hi, Sheila. She's not sure where else to respond, and she's loving listening. Sheila, if you just go to the website, you can get us from there. In fact, no, don't. Just do it on there where you're doing for the moment. There's going to be a big overhaul of the website shortly, so don't worry about it.
Hey, Sheila, Nigel here. Thanks very much. The $20 are in the post.
Okay, right, we're going to get back to this record, and we'll be back shortly, and we'll be discussing a little bit more on the conspiracy theories of 9/11. Don't forget, you can share your details if you're over here in the UK and you're listening. It's 07463 639 815. Give us a text, send us a pizza. It's entirely up to you. If you're going to send a pizza, though, you've got to do two, because you've got to send one up to Dave in Stalybridge as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not leaving you out of this one, mate. Back shortly. This is going to be playing Tom Petty Free Falling straight after this.
Contact us by visiting our webpage at tachyonradio.com. From there, you will find all the ways of getting in touch with us for submissions, queries, and joining in on the live shows. Tachyon Radio, not just any old radio. Tameside Paranormal Researchers, here on Tachyon Radio.
That's good. Would you get that one done?
Oh, I did it just especially. I did it for Dave.
Excellent stuff, yeah. I bet he likes that, doesn't he?
I bloody hope so.
Cool.
Yeah. I was going to get one, but what just went, Dave.
Dave, this is Dave Daimlo, the coolest guy in paranormal.
That's that sinister. It actually scares me.
I thought nothing scared you.
Dave Daimlo is
the heavy breathing on the other side of it.
Dave Daimlo is indefatigable.
Dave Daimlo, TPR, Akiba.
Don't listen to anybody. I'm not indefatigable.
You're ruining it now. If somebody says something legendary about it, don't dispute it.
No, yuck it up, kid. Yuck it up. Go for it as much as you can. Okay, then. So we're back now with some of the 9/11. Nodge is going to bring forth one more.
I could have done with you sort of counting them down.
Number 9.
What are we on for?
Number 9 of 10.
Number 9.
I'm only on to number 9. The other one, which again is
number 9.
Is very widely promulgated, is the New World Order thing, which is basically a belief that there's a higher government, possibly linked to the Knights Templar, who actually kept Bush and Cheney in the dark and used them as patsies, and also controlled Osama bin Laden, which to me seems like a rather disparate sort of group of people to control. But there you are. That's again, I'm counting these down by the actual popularity and also the number of people who apparently believe in such nonsense. What's your take on that one, Dave?
I think, if you play chess, you're in command of, 16 pieces. The majority of them are pawns or the public.
Yeah.
However, as far as the board's concerned and as far as the game's concerned, the king's the main piece and the queen's the most powerful. But there's a higher power controlling the pieces and making the decisions that are playing the game.
Yeah.
And the outcome of the game is not dependent upon the pieces and not dependent upon how powerful the pieces are, but the mindset of the person controlling it. So I kind of understand why people might
go for that.
Go for that. Yeah, the Illuminati are behind it all, and the Bilderberg Conference has been planning things like this.
This is Council of 300 and all that stuff, isn't there? I mean, again, I think it's not the fact. I'm like you. I don't disagree. I think politicians don't control anything. I think basically they are the pawns of the super rich, but I don't believe that these people are that well coordinated, because I think they're all pursuing their own interests. I don't doubt that there are much more powerful people than Dick Cheney and George Bush in the world. But
I think there's pockets of people
I don't believe they all. I don't believe they all sit in a darkened room coordinating their activities. I just don't believe that's the way that these people work.
No, I think
when you're talking about New World Order and Illuminati and controlling the world and all the rest of it, the type of events that are going on for the
Whoops, sorry mate, whoa, what's going on there? Sorry.
In current history, the events that are going on in current history, would you lead you to believe that everybody's just out to destroy one another?
That's right.
Muslim fundamentalists and extremists are out to destroy everybody else, and that's the take on. And that's not the Muslim or Islam in its own right, as we know. It's it's
extreme versions thereof, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's people that are peddling their version of what the Quran teaches and all the rest of it.
Well, I mean, as we know, any kind of fundamentalism is at variance with the very beliefs that it purports to represent. If you look at it, if you look at what absolutely,
too, isn't there?
And I think it's a good opportunity for the three of us to actually say that we acknowledge that fundamentalism is a very different kettle of fish.
I mean, the point that I'm trying to make is it's sort of lent towards destruction. So the conspiracy theory that people want control, you need people to control.
Yeah.
The people that these allegations that are supposedly the centre of the allegations, or the evidence that purports the theory, are people that want to be in positions of power. So as you said before, it isn't in their interests or in their mindset to want to do that kind of thing.
No, I agree.
It's power is only power when you're above other people.
I agree.
Yeah. And I think the world order thing walks hand in hand with the just four currencies, isn't it? I think it's the euro dollar, the Asian dollar, the Indian dollar, and obviously the American dollar and everything else. So, the banking system of the states, the Rothschilds and all the rest.
Do you know what, Dave? You couldn't have led me into the next conspiracy theory, which will be coming up in a few minutes, any better than that. You're absolutely right.
Well done.
Yes,
excellent. That's Dane Daimlo proving himself once again to be the master.
I'm indefatigable.
Indefatigable, yeah.
You'll have to stop eating beans, then you might
curry,
be.
for God's sake.
Right, so where were we up to then, chaps? We just we covered about the plague. We said about the thermite molecules being found at Ground Zero. So what else have we got to say around about Ground Zero on that day before we move on to the next bit? And that's me dropping pens on the floor, so I apologise for that.
No conspiracy theory.
No, not at all.
It was a pen.
When we say the... Sorry, mate, go on.
Sorry, Steve. It's I don't know if I'm a little bit behind with lag because of Skype, so...
It's okay.
Apologies if I talk out of turn. I think that the coordination efforts of the emergency services at Ground Zero on the day, the command centres that were set up to deal with the problem, these firefighters that went out on that day, it's now come to light that as far as the powers that be were concerned, they were going to rescue people. There was no intention of putting the fires out. They knew they couldn't put the fires out. They weren't able to put the fires out. Their job was to try and rescue people and to minimise loss of life, to evacuate the World Trade Center buildings, the World Trade Center complex, get everybody out of there, clear Liberty, Vesey Street and West Street, all the areas around World Trade Center 1 and all the commerce buildings, get people out of the area, secure downtown Manhattan, and get people out of danger. I mean, that's all they were concerned with.
As you'll know, Dave, I mean, from your good lady, I mean, I think we've all three of us been, we all know New York, and the fact of the matter is, of course, it's incredibly compacted, isn't it, the population? So in terms of getting people out of the area, I mean, it's so important, is it, because it's such a small area with so many people, isn't it?
But going back to the firefighters, some of the survivors, obviously, that came out of World Trade Center number 1, which was obviously the first one to be hit, but the last one to collapse. Said there was exposed parts of pillars where the cladding had been removed, where there was strange packages strapped to these pillars, and not just like in the corridors, in the concourse areas where the lifts are all gathered and all the rest of it. They were already there. Now these people have come down from the building and said that even people that were trying to get out were saying that there were people working on these where this cladding were, putting what looked like parcels or packages and strapping them to these basically the columns that supported the actual structure integrity.
I was going to mention this because with what you're saying there, you've got these people who've gone into the building, right? The firefighters, the rescue service and that. Now come on, these people who've gone in there, you've got absolute faith in these people to send them in the first place. So you're not just sending in any old mook. This is somebody that you can rely on, somebody that you can depend on, who you are sending into this building. Yet these people are coming out there and saying, you know what, when we were in there we heard boom, 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 we heard explosions going off. And yet they then turned around and said, oh, you're mistaken about that. You couldn't have heard that. Yet you've got absolute faith in them for going in there to rescue people, but when they make an observation about something, then you can disbelieve it so easily. I find that most detrimental to those people. I think it's
like the Jesse Marcel thing, everything he said about what allegedly happened at Roswell isn't worth believing. He didn't know what a weather balloon was. He must be off his nut. He was in command of an atomic bombing squadron missile. You know what I mean? He was in a position of dropping the bomb. Yeah, and yet if he tells you something's different, it's not a weather balloon, then you can't believe him. Same way as the firefighters, you can trust them to go in and rescue people to do the job that they need to do, but let them say something which is different from the official story, that they heard explosions, that they heard a boom, boom, boom. They saw things which was coming down, which shouldn't have been coming down, things happening that shouldn't have been happening. You can't believe them for that. It's wrong. Them firefighters that went in there, many of the 343 firefighters, and also many police officers and port authority officers and emergency service workers lost their life. It wasn't just the firefighters, but a lot of the firefighters that were lost there were lost helping people down the stairs.
That's right.
They were helping people get out of the building.
I mean, it's amazing, that, isn't it? It's amazing. What they did was superhuman.
Lives.
Yeah.
right to the end as well. A lot of those guys knew what was going to happen to the building. I don't know about you two, but I mean, I'm in awe of something that is so counterintuitive. If you see these large buildings, they're frightening. They're frightening things just to walk past them.
Yeah, you look up, it knocks you sick.
Yeah, exactly. And then if one is obviously, threatened with coming down or is on fire, I'm just. It's beyond admiration, the fact that these guys knew what they were getting into and still did it.
I just think it's so wrong that you can place so much trust into somebody, and then yet if they say or believe or do something which is outside what you want, that you can rip them apart and say, that's absolute nonsense, that. These guys had come down. There's lots of documentary footage out there of these people reporting hearing explosions, of seeing explosions in the car park literally seconds before the plane hit. There's people who worked in those buildings who, in the car parks at the bottom, explosions went off. They were thrown forward, they were thrown upwards, and then 6 seconds later there was the big explosion from above. What's going on there?
Lots and lots of files of the actual witness testimonies of the emergency service workers on that day in PDF format. I've got this absolutely thousands of them. I've got so many, it's unbelievable, right? I'm not going to say where they come from, but should you want them, you can have them, guys, by the way.
Most definitely.
And all of them are describing the horror of what went on the day, of making the way there. Some of them, obviously, they're going through Brooklyn Battery and all the rest of it, coming from all sorts of areas to get in there. But the overriding message that you get in when you look into it is that to them, it looked like it was an explosion. The damage that was done on the ones that managed to get out, that was an explosion that come from inside the building. And when the towers came down and they had to run, obviously, scatter all over the place, that the preceding floors, 2 to 3 floors below the point of descent, were exploding out. Puffs of smoke were coming out, and there were booms, as you said,
and the molten metal.
Yep.
And they were coming down in free fall speed. It was coming down in free fall speed. Now I think even the architects, there isn't, how many architects believe that that's possible? Because there's an entire architectural movement. I forget the name of the body now. I should have really looked into that, and I did know it. It's not in my brain at the moment. But they're completely against it, and it lists like 2,000 of the world's top architects.
Yeah, that believe that it's absolute nonsense what happened on the day of the official explanation.
Yeah, there's no way that they could have come down like that under their own duress, because the kinetic energy, the inertia, as it reaches more resistance, becomes less and less and less.
Yeah.
So there's less power to force the floors that are further down to be able to be compacted underneath.
Exactly.
It would, go down so far and then collapse over, you'd still expect to see 40, 50, 60 floors remaining.
I think if you dropped a weight on its own from 4,000 metres, what's the height of the building, I think it is, it should, even with no resistance, e.g., friction from air or anything like that, should only take 8 seconds. That building came down in 10. So that shows there was no resistance there. The only way there could be no resistance is as each floor was meeting the next one, that there was the explosions to take that floor away for the least resistance as possible. Because if it's like you say,
time after an explosion, isn't it? The vacuum's created and the pressure, which would account for the time delay from 8 to 10.
Exactly.
I forget the name of it, but there is a formula for working it out. Where there's like a time delay because of the explosion, for want of better terminology. So when it was in its actual collapsing state coming down, it was around about 8.5 seconds.
But when you think of the floors involved, that timing, it's a fraction of a second which builds up over that amount of time for the floors what were involved. So that
10
is
floors per second.
Yeah, it's very, very precise timing to do those explosions for each floor, which to do that, because as you say, if that top, where the building was burnt, even if it was a case of the building bowed inwards because the floors were collapsing, then once it reached the floors beneath where it was still solid, it would then meet the resistance. So you'd either have that point where the building wouldn't go any further, it would be a case of that the pressure would go onto it, it'd drop down, it might knock a couple more floors off from underneath, but
too tidy.
That's it.
You've got the one side that's been hit is going to be the side that's going to have least resistance, because that's already got a big gaping hole in it. So when the top floors start to descend upon the supporting floors, for want of a better word, it would lean as if you were chopping a tree down.
Exactly.
That's the analogy.
Yeah, it would lean to the side, like you say, when you take that wedge out of a tree, it would lean towards that, and then it would fall over. But it didn't. Like you say, it went straight onto its own footprint, which is, as far as I'm concerned, pretty much bloody impossible.
Yeah.
All you need to do is look on the internet at any kind of demolition, of controlled demolitions, and you can watch hours and hours of it. It's there for anybody to see all over YouTube, Vimeo, or whatever else you want, however else you want to go and look at it, and watch controlled explosions. And I defy anybody to watch that and then look at how the Twin Towers came down. Ask yourself this question.
And I remember saying on the day when I saw it, that's a controlled explosion. That was the first thought in my head. It was a controlled explosion. I originally thought that they got people into the building and blown it so that it wouldn't go over and cause death and damage to anywhere in the Manhattan area, surrounding it. That's what I initially thought.
You got a big problem, big out of control fires, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet up in the air with debris raining down all over downtown Manhattan. How do you get rid of the problem?
Yeah, it's the only way to do it, which is World Trade Center 7 as well, which we'll come to shortly.
Absolutely. What's next on the list, Nodge?
What's next on the list? Well, the next one I've got is the Sino Forces one. Have you come across that one, Dave?
No.
Yeah, well,
Sino Forces.
Sino Forces. And this is. I told you they get. Yeah, I told you they get wackier as we go along. One of the theories is, and this is my number 8. Theorists noted that Bush's presidency began with a US spy plane drama over China, which it did. And the proposal is that 9/11 was basically a strike against America by the Chinese in response to that. So this is, again, another one that's been... It's another theory that's been sort of widely promulgated and widely believed, and when you think about it, it's completely wacko, because if you think about China was just about to take off economically. It's got a huge arsenal of intercontinental nuclear weapons, so, it didn't really need planes to do the damage. It's got, domestic airliners, really, I don't know, it doesn't sound plausible to me. And the other thing is the Chinese have bought out huge numbers of US bonds, so it's in their interest for the US to do well, because the US are their chief debtor.
I think you've made a good point. I mean, the Chinese, the commerce and the trade that's coming out of China now, the sheer amount of products the Chinese made that are just flooding the markets in the States and in Western Europe.
It doesn't make any sense.
Unbelievable.
It is, and yet when you think about the timing of it, this theory to me makes no sense whatsoever, because as is the case with any, again, it's the fundamental of it is the economics, and whenever you've got a creditor and a debtor, it is not in the creditor's interest to have the debtors suffer because they're not going to get their money back. And the fact of the matter is, the US government owed China twice the GDP of the United States. So again, that's another theory I've highlighted as a very popular one, which to me holds no water whatsoever.
It's like the people that condemn the actions of Russia, and they look at Russia as being an enemy. Russia is a total separate entity from the rest of the world, and always has been, because it's not ready to kowtow to the main string pulling, if you like, of the West. However, billions and billions in aid has gone over to Russia.
Yeah.
Anything detrimental from them to the West is going to destroy their commerce and destroy their infrastructure. It's just not going to happen.
That's absolutely correct. And the fact of the matter is now that because of the way that global economics has evolved in the post-war world, the fact of the matter is all the major economies now are so interdependent that it's not in the interest of any one major government to attack any other.
That's the Chinese wanting to bring down the World Trade Centers. You can understand that as being a position of for the commerce and for, like say, bonds and that, but it doesn't really explain the attack on the Pentagon.
It doesn't, and to be honest, again, it's a very, very popular theory, and as I say, the more this list goes on, the more popular and widely believed the theories are, and to me, the more wacko they become.
I just want to mention something, like we were saying a few minutes ago about actually bringing a building down because of the possible problems it could cause if it did just fall down on its own.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. I'm just going to go to this. I'm going to read this out. It may sound, because if I start reading this, you might think, oh, he's very eloquent. It's not. I'm just a mook who can't read. I'm going to read this off this list. Right, and then I'm going to play a little piece of audio, and then we'll get back to it from there. Is that okay?
Crack on.
Yeah, okay.
Go for it.
Furthermore, a controlled demolition like the one Larry Silverstein was told would be carried out on his unsafe building has to be set up for days. All the materials have to be placed, the structural core columns and beams have to be precisely cut to enable the building to fall in on itself and not damage the surrounding buildings just feet away. So how could they arrange all that for Building 7 in a matter of hours? Unless they knew it was going to happen, or they instigated it. This is a factor that many are not even aware of, but needs to be considered on a serious level. Was this planned or unplanned? In order for us to believe that this was a spontaneous event that the government did not have prior knowledge of, we have to also believe that these extremist terrorists had the time and the opportunity to go into those buildings and plant the bombs and necessary materials, thermate, and cut the support beams without anyone knowing. Could this actually happen, considering the tight security present at the buildings? And of course, an interesting point to reflect on is that Larry Silverstein also owned the other two towers that fell, recently acquired them for a ridiculously low value, insured each one separately for terrorist attacks, and coincidentally made a colossal profit from the horrific attacks.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such a terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
3 years later, Silverstein issued a statement claiming that he had used the term pull it to refer to pulling the firefighters out of Building 7. But there are several problems with Silverstein's explanation. According to FEMA's building performance study, firefighters were never in the building. Preliminary indications were that due to lack of water, no manual firefighting actions were taken by the fire department. And these statements, from Popular Mechanics and the New York Times, confirmed that no firefighting took place in Building 7, and that the fire department had ordered firefighters away from the building at 11:30 a.m. Another problem is that Silverstein made no reference to the firefighters when he talked about Building 7 for the PBS documentary. Plus, after Silverstein stated that the decision was made to pull Building 7, he finished his sentence with these words.
And then we watched the building collapse.
This would indicate that the collapse of Building 7 was the direct result of the decision to pull it. As a successful property developer, Silverstein would have gained considerable experience in hiring contractors to carry out controlled demolition of buildings. It's reasonable to assume that he would be aware that the term pull is often used by demolition experts to refer to bringing a building down. For example, here's Ground Zero's post-disaster wrecking crew talking about preparing to demolish Building 6.
Oh, we're getting ready to pull Building 6.
When referring to Building 7, it was Silverstein who suggested that the smartest thing to do was to pull it.
I said, we've had such a terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it.
And because Silverstein has more knowledge of controlled demolition than he does of firefighting, it is reasonable to assume that he was referring to pulling the building down.
There we go, that's Larry Silverstein in his own words about pulling building World Trade Center 7. Hello, David.
Hello there, mate.
Sorry, just making sure there and you haven't fell asleep.
No. I do remember that actually, the entire Pullet episode, and you know, it was allegedly the fires that have been caused in World Trade Center 7 had been caused by debris from the other two. World Trade Center 1 and World Trade Center 2, and caused structural damage inside, which is why it collapsed. Is the official explanation.
Apparently, according to people who are in the know, shall we say, there was not that much fire damage within the building which would have caused it to have needed to have been demolished, and certainly would not have collapsed on itself either.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, Nod, just want to say hello to somebody. You're welcome to. Go on, mate.
Oh, yeah, we've got my friend Vania from Brazil. Hello, Vania, and thanks very much for following our wacky debate.
Hello, Vania, from us.
Hello, Vania.
Yes, from myself and David saying hello.
Why are you doing it in that creepy voice?
Just like doing it's supposed to be Clouseau voice. Bonjour, my name is Guy Guidois. Oh, hang on.
I thought it was very good, Steve.
Pardon?
I thought it was very good.
Thank you very much, my friend. Have you seen my minky?
I think it is with the boom in your room.
Oh, Keto, you fool.
A boom?
A boom? Well, we shouldn't talk about booms at this point of the road. Oh, hang on. Right, come on. Go on, Nodge. Launch it, mate. Go on.
Number 7, which is sort of half a good theory wrapped in half a bad one, which is basically the whole military-industrial complex thing. Now, this conspiracy theory actually contends that the forces of the Pentagon, keen on a coup d'etat of the military-industrial complex, are said to have covered up that a drone plane or missile hit the Pentagon. Furthermore, that they actually shot down Flight 93 into a field when it became surplus to requirements. Some, including MI5 whistleblower David Shaler, believe that no planes were involved in the attack at all, but missiles shrouded in holograms. Now, the problem is this is sort of two theories in one, but it's been rolled into one wacky conspiracy theory, and I'm afraid any explanation that involves holograms lose me at page one.
I'm sorry, but I can't go for that either. You're talking some serious technology there anyway, and the fact that it would have to be moving technology to fool thousands from God knows how many different angles.
The other thing is you can say that politically a coup d'etat of the military-industrial complex wasn't really required, because Dick Cheney is the military-industrial complex and was well in control of government at the time.
I mean, is it Flight 93, the one that crashed into the ground?
Yeah.
Like I was saying before, all you got to do is look at the actual wreckage, and it doesn't pan out for a plane that crashed into the ground. There was a gentleman who was a coroner who turned up on the scene, and he said, I was a coroner for about 30 seconds. There was no bodies, and there was not a drop of blood. You're going to find something there, which, if it's crashed into the ground. I mean, how many times in the past were we sort of subjected to media coverage of aircraft that had hit the ground, and you had the obligatory doll on the floor of a child or something, which gave you the illusion, obviously, because they weren't going to stick it on TV, of kids who had been killed in the air crash. So there would have been something there for this coroner to look at, but he said there was just nothing there for him to look at.
Yeah, like you say, there'll have been something there. I mean, we're not obviously not wanting to go into gruesome and grisly details, but I mean that's what he's there for, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to find absolutely nothing. I mean, even with a really bad explosion, with a massive impact, there would be something. There would be remains.
Well, not just a few minutes ago, we were all talking about molecules of material being found in. So, with today's modern forensic techniques, it's virtually impossible that you wouldn't find anything. Virtually impossible, isn't it?
Yeah, it was so wrong. I mean,
it doesn't add up, does it?
They were saying that it literally impacted deep into the ground, which if it was going to collide with the ground, like we were saying before about a plane hitting at speed at the side of the Pentagon, the official out, they're saying it's going to vaporise it hitting the side of the building, which we sort of it was a bone of contentiousness, saying that no, that's not going to happen because you'd still have those massive engines. But by the same token, if it's going to hit the ground at speed, then the official explanation for the Pentagon would still sort of work that way and say, oh, well, actually it vaporised on hitting the ground, but it didn't. It managed to bury its way in. You can't have it both ways for an official explanation.
Yeah, they try to have the cake and eat it there.
Definitely. Most definitely. Oh, you got something else, Nudge?
No.
I thought it was writing these papers then.
No, I'm actually looking at the next ones because I'm just looking through some of the increasingly crazy conspiracy theories.
I mean Flight 97. Oh, is it Flight 97? I can't remember. I mean, okay, I'll turn this into like a broad piece actually, because my memory's not getting too good nowadays. I am getting older. But some of the phone calls which were allegedly sent from the aircraft as well, that sort of don't hold so much water either. There was a gentleman who phoned his mother with the opening phrase, "Hi Mum, this is Mark Brigham." You're not going to phone your mum and then tell her who you are you? You say it's your son or it's Mark. You're not going to give your full name, are you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's a lot of rumours going about that, perhaps the voices were mimicked using vocal technologies, which are available, and certainly are available to the military and certainly to the surveillance industries, or should I say, parts of the government. So, you can't sort of negate that. But there's also other things saying that... like you were saying before about radios not working or working depending if they had battery backup in the aircraft. From what I can gather, with the phones which were used on the aircraft, it was like a pay-per-go thing. You put your credit card in, you'd be able to use the phone on the aircraft and dial out. Once that connection was broke, it was over with. It was as simple as that. It no longer worked. Yet there was instances of people who had phoned people on them aircraft, and long after the aircraft had hit the buildings, the carrier wave for the phones was still open, even up to, I think it was 19 minutes in one case.
They would be dead, surely. There would be nothing there for it to go through to.
No, exactly. You can't have a carrier wave if something's not there.
I mean, the radio frequency still exists. That frequency is still there.
Yeah.
The sense signal will still be transmitted there. There's just obviously nothing there to receive it.
Exactly. So if somebody is... perhaps I'm explaining it wrong, I don't know. So say I was talking to you from an aircraft and it did, for whatever reason, slammed into the side of a building and the aircraft was destroyed. If that phone is still open at your end, is that a reasonable assumption, or is that a case of that shouldn't happen because the plane at the other end, there's nothing there for it to be open to?
It should just cut off and be gone, surely.
Yeah, that's my reasoning behind it. But in two cases, I'm sure one was 19 minutes and I think the other was 24 minutes, that it was still open for, and people were still saying, "Are you there? Are you still transmitting? Are you there?"
Yeah, I find that very difficult to believe. Surely the line would just be cut, it would be gone.
I'm just trying to find... I've got something... in regards of the phone calls, I'm sure just bear with me one sec, Dave.
I mean, you would have obviously the RF, it would be radio energy, radio waves from the plane to the nearest receiver or repeater, which then relayed the telephone signal to the operator and then off to the relevant domestic location where the phone calls were being directed to or from.
Yeah.
And there would still be a line from there to the operator, if you like, or the switchboard. There would still be an active line there, but the line from the switchboard or from the relay up to the plane would obviously be dead.
Yeah, I'll read this out to you. It'll probably make more sense then in the way it's actually been done rather than me sort of trying to remember it, okay? It says, perhaps the most puzzling such call was supposedly made by Todd Beamer, who is often credited as being the passenger most responsible for preventing the hijackers on UA-93 from hitting their Washington, D.C. target. According to government data, Todd's call remained connected for 3,295 seconds, or close to 55 minutes, meaning the call seems to have been remained connected about 45 minutes after UA-93 had crashed. Lisa Jefferson, the GTE supervisor whom Beamer had spoken to, herself described, "I was still on the line and the plane took a dive, and by then it was just silent. I held on until after the plane crashed. probably about 15 minutes longer, and I never heard a crash. It just went silent because, well, I can't explain it. We didn't lose a connection because there's a different sound that you use. It's a squealing sound when you lose a connection. I never lost connection. It just went silent. Furthermore, Jefferson noted that Beamer sounded so tranquil it made me begin to doubt the authenticity and urgency of his call. The same unbelievable calmness was observed in numerous other calls from those aboard hijacked planes on 9/11. For example, the recording from the A-11 flight attendant Betty Ong shows her unusual composure as she spoke of mace having been used and not having been able to breathe.
Yeah.
So 55 minutes, that doesn't seem quite likely, does it?
Seems completely impossible, that.
I mean, there is a couple of other inconsistencies in regard to the phone call. Just one sec, let me just find them for you, mate. So as you can tell, I'm not really bloody well prepared, am I? There we go. Several calls from passengers on the hijacked planes couldn't possibly have been made. Doubts have been raised on many phone calls that were supposedly made from the hijacked planes on 9/11. Two calls in particular are identified as being the most questionable. The first was the one received by Dina Burnett, the wife of UA-93 passenger Tom Burnett. Dina told the FBI interviews that she had received several calls from her husband's cell phone, a fact that she said was confirmed by the caller ID on her phone. In fact, Dina herself wondered how her husband could have been calling on his cell phone while he was above 35,000 feet in the air, as cell phones at the time were not capable of making such calls. Later, the FBI concluded that Tom's calls were made using a plane phone, but the agency never explained why Dina would lie about seeing her husband's cell phone number on her caller ID. The second one, involving television commentator Barbara Olson's calls from AA-77, raises even more questions because the use of both a cell phone and a plane phone seemed to be ruled out by prevailing facts. At the time of the calls, AA-77 was too high an altitude for cell phone calls to be made. Plus, the FBI had concluded that all calls made from AA-77 were made using the plane phone. However, a page in the Boeing 757 AMM manual, the type of plane Olson was on, mentioned that the passenger telephone system had previously deactivated. So how could Barbara have used a plane phone for her calls?
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting, yeah.
Isn't it? So I must confess I never knew that.
So why, or should I say, have these calls been made? Have they been falsified? If they have been falsified, for what reason? And if that is the case, what happened to the passengers after they'd made these calls for whatever reason they'd asked them to make the calls?
The other reason is there's no reason why this lady would lie about seeing the caller ID of her husband.
No, exactly.
None whatsoever.
I mean, are we talking along the lines of, what's it, Capricorn 1 type thing? I don't know. It just seems very, very strange to me, all these inconsistencies that are coming out, especially in regards of these passenger calls. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was listening to the Betty Young calls, and for me, maybe it's just me, I'd have been kicking and screaming, me. You know, somebody was box cutters and that. You know, I don't care. I think, you know, if it was a chance of somebody said they had a bomb on board, I think the majority of people would try and take these people out in the hope that it was a case that they were bluffing. But she seems so like, oh well, this is happening. Yes, somebody's...
Yeah, I concur with that. I've also heard them, and she does sound very, very collected, and like she's got it together for sure.
Somebody's been stabbed. You know, good God, somebody's been stabbed. You'd be freaking out. Or is that the train? I don't know. I really don't know. Perhaps that's just me. That's how I would react. But I mean, I'm a bit highly strung when it comes to stuff like that. Especially if it was on a plane, which somebody said there was a bomb on, and it started hurtling towards a building. I think, you know, hang on a minute. I'm not just going to stay here. I'm going to try somewhere. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't marry up with what your perception of reality would be if you was in the same circumstances.
I mean, it's like one of the statements, what one of them said, it's like, oh my God, we're over water. I mean, that's very Hollywood, that. I mean, these people would have obviously known flying around, you know, if they're coming into New York and places like that, they must have been on planes that had been to New York, and they'd know what an approach, or even if it was a slightly different approach, they'd know what it was like. They'd know that they'd be coming over water, and then there wouldn't be some statement like, oh my God, we're over water. That, for me, is very scripted. I may be wrong, but that's just... I mean, Nodge is a writer. I do writing as well. But for me, that does sound like something out of a script that you would say, like, that would be put forward to sort of to make some kind of dramatic impact. So if you were on a call with somebody, that would, oh my God, we're so low, we're above water, we're travelling at speed. It's all things there which give that impetus to some kind of emotion of something that's happening in that moment.
Yeah, to propagate drama.
Yeah.
Of course, there was great drama on the day just because of the sheer,
exactly. That's just it. The enormity of it, what's going on. Can you actually turn around and say that it's being dramatical for any other purpose?
Yeah.
But it just doesn't add up with the calls, how they were done, in which method they were done, that nobody seems to know. Was it a cell phone? Was it a plane? If it was, then it can't have been a plane, a phone, because of the height they were at that time when it was done. It couldn't have been a cell phone for the same reason. So why were these calls actually made? How were they able to get through? Why would somebody introduce himself to his mother in his full name? I'm damn sure if I phoned my mum up, I'd be going, "Hi Mum, it's Steve."
Of course, the countervailing argument is, and I take it entirely what you're saying on board, I think that's quite right. The countervailing argument is we don't know what circumstances those people were actually, what sort of duress they were under on the planes, if they were surrounded by...
I understand that, but even under a form of duress,
no, I agree.
You could not... You might be able... you'd be able to sort of say what you were told to say, but would you be able to be that calm? You'd still have... You'd have the anxiety and everything else that goes along with it. You can't turn that off. Yeah. But that's still, again, if they're being told to say something, how can they say it on a phone at such an altitude? And the physics behind it, or should I say, would it be telephonics? I don't know. Is that the word, Dave? That type of thing behind it. You'd still have to have an explanation for how they were able to operate the call on that, whether it's staged or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the human psyche is the human psyche, and emotional distress is going to come through no matter what. Everything else in history points towards people being affected by the environment and what's going on, and it's difficult to stay controlled.
It's inevitable, isn't it? I mean, it's almost impossible that you would be preternaturally calm in that situation, isn't it?
If somebody had a gun to your head and said, right, be calm and make a phone call, that, I'm afraid, is not possible.
No.
There would certainly be signs that he was under duress.
Not unless you train military, no.
Well, it's another part of that day that doesn't quite add up.
Just one in many parts that don't add up. You see, and that's the thing which is hard to totally poo-poo any conspiracy theory, is the fact that there's so many unanswered questions that help propagate it, and it just continues and continues.
That's absolutely right, and I think this is why so many of the conspiracy theories that I've listed here are very sort of redolent of cognitive dissonance. A lot of them are interspersed with a sort of kernel of possibility and a huge wrapping of nonsense, and that's the problem.
And that is it. That is the problem. That is the nonsense things that throws everything away. But everything what we've tried to discuss here so far, there has been a case of like, well, why has this happened? If that can't, we've tried to look at it rationally. We haven't sort of jumped in and said it's a hologram. It's an alien invading force pretending to be an aircraft. We've not done anything like that. We've actually said, well, okay, if this is the case, why has that happened? If this has happened, then how could it have possibly happened if this is the case? We've looked at it in so many different ways, and we've tried to rationalise it.
You see it in paranormal investigation, there's this kind of thing where there is bits what can be considered true that I would think most people would believe and say, yeah, I can accept that. But because there's that much drama that goes around a lot of people that are involved in it, there's a lot of ridiculousness that surrounds it too, because of the way people propagate it. Difficult for the mainstream to swallow. It's difficult for people to take on board with any kind of sincerity, and even more so the actual scientific establishment, because of that very same reason,
Yeah.
And you're getting that with conspiracy theories, because as you've said, there's that kernel of truth, that there's that little molecule of possibility in there, and it's buried deep beneath piles and piles of utter madness, for want of a better word. It's just complete fabrication for the most part.
That's it.
But they will use snippets to justify its own merit.
It's like a curate's egg, isn't it? In a way, what they'll do is they'll take one theory and marry it up to another. I mean, I think that the classic case of that is the old military-industrial complex thing. I mean, we all know that there are very powerful forces behind the American government, which is beyond disputation. But then the other thing is that it then gets mixed in with a silly theory about hologram-covered missiles and so on.
Well, I've just found, like I was saying about the phone calls before, I've just found another. I mean, it covers some of the ground we've gone, but I'll just go back over it again. It's saying that cell phone calls from passengers in the hijacked aircraft were probably faked. It says the infamous cell phone calls placed by passengers and airline personnel on 9/11 are another bone of contention. According to studies, cell phone calls at high altitudes, especially during 2001, were often impossible to make. Whether the recorded calls, such as Todd Beamer's notorious "Let's Roll" call, alluding to action against terrorists who had taken over the plane, were faked through voice simulation and other high-tech methods is subject to fierce debate. The vast majority of these phone calls came from Flight 93. Over time, it's been pointed to a series of changed stories about the origin of cell phone calls from airlines on 9/11. For example, it's now believed that many of the impossible cell phone calls were actually placed from onboard airphones. However, shifting versions of events have raised suspicions about revisionist history on the part of 9/11 debunkers and insiders. One key element of the faked cell phone calls conspiracy theory is based around a strange conversation between passenger Mark Brigham and his own mother. Mark Brigham: "Mom, this is Mark Brigham. I want you to know that I love you. I'm on a flight from Newark to San Francisco and there are 3 guys who have taken over the plane and they say they have a bomb." Brigham's mother: "Who are these guys?" Mark Brigham: "You believe me, don't you?" Brigham's mother: "Yes, Mark, I believe you, but who are these guys?" People are often puzzled and dismayed by the caller's use of his first and last names during a phone call with his own mother. They believe this interaction never really happened, that it's a result of high-tech voice morphing technology.
What do you think?
As soon as I open my voice, my mother knows it's me.
Yeah, exactly.
You've no need to say
as soon as the start, the first syllable,
most of us normally say
it's me.
That's it. You say it's me, don't you?
I'll never forget your dad, Dave, many years ago. He got a piece of software and he wanted to do something as a joke. And shall we say there is a UFO investigator of our acquaintance.
That's the way you guys have got all diplomatic suddenly when we've been accusing Dick Cheney and people of terrible things.
Yeah, well,
pulling down world governments, but yet not wanting to.
And suddenly we've gone all shy about a ufologist.
Your dad
it's hilarious.
Your dad had some audio of this guy. And I've said guy, I should have said this person.
Oh, that's blown that one then, hasn't it?
And what he did, he made this absolute comic sentence up about, it was absolute, let's just say it was absolutely disgusting, right? And your dad got this piece of footage of this bloke and used this software and then started doing stuff with frequency analysis, and he mapped it over what he'd read.
Yeah.
Played it back, and it was this guy saying this stuff what your dad had wrote, and it was sheer bloody genius. Now I don't know what the software was. I wish I did, because it would come in handy for a lot of stuff that I want to do, you know, for stuff in regards to the radio, for doing like voices on shows and stuff like that. But I tell you, it was bloody amazing. So if your dad could do that with a piece of software that he'd got on a little piece of footage, what is it that somebody in, like, you know, the military, in the surveillance industry and stuff like that, the stuff that they must have and be able to do?
Absolutely, yeah. It's going to, what you can mess about with at home is going to pale into insignificance with what, like, government agencies are able to
Definitely.
Surely, you know?
Definitely. I mean, even at a smaller level, with the software we've got at home, we can cut and paste interviews to make it sound how we want it to sound, which is at a very base level. Years ago was what the media and the government used to do to turn people against people. We got to look, like, you know, Richard Doty and the way he sort of used disinformation against Paul Benowitz many years ago in a similar type thing, and that was at a very base level. So imagine what you could do with the technology there, which could actually give somebody somebody else's voice.
Now, I'm not disputing any of this, guys, but my question to you is what your thoughts are behind the reason why.
The reason why is, the simple statement for me is that let's roll, because George Bush used that, didn't he, when he was going to he said let's roll. That's
to personalise and humanise the event even more.
You think of it, some guys had that, before this happened, he phoned his mother to tell her that he loved her. He's the all-American lad. He's done it. And before he went, let's roll, which again Bush used.
So what we're saying is this is essentially to feed a sham.
Definitely. I would say so. If that is the case, that the American government used this as some tool of their own to morph somebody's voice, to take this gentleman and to speak to his mother and then record it, which again seems very, very odd, the fact that it was recorded. I mean, I used to phone my mum a lot before she passed away, but she never used to record her calls or anything like that.
No.
So,
mothers don't tend to be big on that.
Yeah, so it does.
They tend to be more concerned
than any other call.
Yeah, exactly.
Why that call? Why not every single call? Why that specific one? And to say I'm on a plane and I'm flying over such and such a place. Was she that out of touch with her own son? She didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah,
she didn't even know he was on a plane in the first place.
I mean, if she'd not have been in,
identify himself because she didn't know who he was, let alone where he was going. There's just so many inconsistencies.
If she'd have not been in and it had been an answer phone and it would have been, Mum, it's me, I don't know if I'm going to be able to speak to you again, I just want to let you know I love you, and that was recorded, then you'd say fair enough. But there's so much surrounding it.
What you're saying is it sounds staged.
Exactly, which we were saying before about the Hollywood aspect of some of these calls. Now,
like
these
Joe Westerhouse has written that. Is that what we're saying?
We all know that these people died on the aircraft, and it's a terrible loss. What I find absolutely disgusting is if these people have been, their voice, their manner, whatever, has been manipulated to further a cause. Then that is so awful. It really is so awful. These people have died. I mean, it's such shocking circumstances for them to die in anyway, but to die for a cause which they probably didn't believe in, which has been fed basically for money. Come on, that is so disgusting.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's really despicable, that.
I mean,
to think that it's, I mean, we are discussing conspiracy theories regarding the event anyway, and any conspiracy theory is obviously steeped in despicable and atrocious acts, and there's no escaping that fact.
No, there's not, but when you think that, say, that gentleman who spoke to his mum and gave the Let's Roll speech, that was the thing then that got the American public behind the government to go and invade Iraq. His final words, or whatever, his voice to give those final words, have twisted that gentleman from what he was into some figurehead for something which he probably didn't even believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's made him like the patriotic poster, recruiting poster.
That's it.
Your country needs you kind of figurehead. When he obviously he might not have been his mentality towards anything to do towards the Middle East. It puts him in that. It posthumously puts him as a poster boy for that kind of motive, doesn't it? Because
until George Bush actually came out with that and said, let's roll basically against the Iraqis and bring the war machine to Iraq, that statement of let's roll was assigned to that gentleman. It's as simple as that. And then Bush took it on board, and then it sort of transcended from what it was into something entirely different.
Yes, it's difficult to fathom the mentality of people that would be, involved in this, and how they could rest easy, knowing the lengths that they'd gone to make a cover up. The fact that if you've done something, it's almost in the human psyche to want to let other people know about it as a degree of success. This is what I've done.
Yeah.
And just that, it's something that big regarding 9/11, and keeping a secret about it. The not one person letting it slip. I was involved in this and I done this and that. Just the very nature of human beings makes me wonder. Because most people like to say about their achievements or what they've done, whether it's positive or negative, you know, and a lot of people can't keep their mouth shut, full stop.
Which, again, though, we could look back to the Manhattan experiment with the, with the atomic bomb. The amount of people who were involved with that who never said anything. So we've got like a double-edged sword with that, where it could be a case of. But again, I think that the people who were involved with that, with 9/11, were so high up within the government who probably got paid a hell of a lot of money for hush money. I think, I don't care how far the human psyche is to say, like, oh, look what I've been involved in. Sometimes money talks louder.
Yeah, and that flies in the face of morals in every sense of the word. Like I said, when power breeds corruption,
Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the unfortunate thing is, like we're saying, we're not talking about people with morals anyway. So to them, a few.
No, we're talking about politicians.
Yes, a few million quid in the bank means absolutely nothing to lives that they've actually taken.
And we've got morals of sewer rats.
Right, well, I'm going to play a record, and what we'll probably do, we'll come back, we'll chat a little bit more, and then we're going to wrap it up for the evening, because I don't believe it's actually 11 o'clock. So I'm going to play another record which was banned on the day. I'm not going to play the version by the band which originally did it, that it was banned on the day. As ever, on every time we do a show, we always play a record from the gentleman in question. So I'm going to play Spirit in the Sky, but it's going to be William Shatner. So I'll be back to you shortly, Dave. Okay, mate?
Yeah, okie dokies.
See you in a sec.
About time I done the family thing soon anyway, so it's good timing.
All right, mate. Won't be a sec.
Okie dokie.
Your daily dose of the strange, Into the Unknown with Steve Yarwood, here on Tachyon Radio.
You know what? We can't have a show without William Shatner. It's as simple as that.
Below us, drifting,
comedy genius,
floating, weightless, calling.
Okay, Bill. That's enough.
Okay, stop now.
Yeah.
It's passing through a cosmic cloud.
Did you enjoy that bit of Mr. Shatner, David?
Don't answer that, Dave. You're thinking exactly what I'm thinking.
It was either that or I was going to play Iron Man.
I'm almost traumatised.
Yeah, absolutely, I was just thinking the same.
You can't say things like that, Dave. You've got to have a bit of shat.
I'm pretty sure he's got enough of it for all of us.
Yeah, I think that's very well put, Dave. Yeah.
In fact, hang on, let me just...
Oh no, not more.
No, I just want to annoy Dave now because of what he said, actually. I'm not having this. Right, okay. This I'm just going to quickly play a little bit of this just for you, Dave. Okay.
Okie dokie.
When it decides to... Are you ready for this?
Is it not really?
Not really, no. I was just thinking the same, yeah. What the hell? God. No. Do you know what, Dave? I'm going to have to go home and play all my Floyd albums just to wash it out.
Do you not love that?
It's not exactly Rush and Go to the Chance, is it? Let's be honest. No, I don't love that, I must confess.
Okay, you're a pair of Philistines. It's as simple as that.
We are somewhat Philistinic, I think.
So there you go. You've had a double shot.
That's what happens when you eat too much curry.
Oh yeah, it's a thing that I have to do, Dave. That every time I do a show, I have to at least play one William Shatner record.
Yeah, it's sort of like a disease. I like to think.
I understand the affliction that you're suffering.
It could have been one of them adverts, isn't it? This is Steve, and it's got like this like tinkly music in the background. Yeah. Please help him.
In fact, I'm thinking of writing a sketch. This is Steve. He needs help.
Yeah.
You see, the wonderful thing is it would be the kind of sketch that almost writes itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't take a lot of writing.
Guided by circumstance.
Yeah. Like automatic writing. Yeah.
I wonder.
No, not more.
No, it's okay. I was just wondering. Hang on. Yeah, you might appreciate this, right?
Oh, you might not.
This is a sketch.
I don't think it's mandatory that you appreciate it.
What Nudge wrote, okay? So I'm going to play this because you were saying it's sketches that write yourself. I'm going to play this one just for you, Dave.
Most of my stuff writes itself.
Have a listen to this and just see how true it is, okay?
You're listening to Tachyon Radio, the station so good it meets itself on the way back.
From the company who brought you Musty, the smell of Jacques Cousteau's wetsuit. Tarty, the fragrance of a girl's night out in Berry. Boing, the fragrance evoking the sound of a marble rattling around David Beckham's cranium. And Snob, the perfume that smells just like every other perfume ever made. Ever. Comes a new aroma for the modern metrosexual. Peace, the smell of stockboard. Garnered by strapping test tubes to the scent glands of alley cats from Reddish, and inspired by the great smell of the A6 comes Peace. The fragrance that evokes the memory of the acting industry, smashing glass, and the constant sound of sirens from Stepping Hill. Peace. Pour on, pour femme, pour carefully.
There we go, Dave.
That is fantastic.
Oh, thanks, mate. Do you know, I've forgotten the rope, though.
No, you see the level we're aiming at.
Do you know, that's just an excuse for me to do my growly voice, basically.
Do you know what?
A yardstick with which to measure success against.
When we recorded that, there's a bit in it when we had this cat meowing, and we couldn't stop laughing for about 20 minutes.
Do you know what, though? That cat will never be the same again.
Angus, come back.
I'll never be the same again.
Right, okay, we better wrap this up then, haven't we?
I'm going to just do a quick whistle-stop tour of the remaining conspiracy.
Okie dokie.
Okay, so we've gone through robbery, we've gone through the New World Order, we've gone through the Sino forces, we've gone for the military-industrial complex, which is the only one that slightly holds water. There's also the one about the CIA knowing that the attack was going to happen and Al-Qaeda actually informing them, rather the way that the IRA used to inform the British government.
Yeah,
which is another one. There's the Towers owners, which of course we've already spoken about. Larry Silverstein made 500 million out of it. Theorists note that John O'Neill, the senior counterintelligence officer who resigned from the FBI just earlier, took over at security at the WTC on the day of the attacks, which is quite interesting. Number 4 is my personal favourite wacko one, which is Psychos. Scientologists have claimed that Thetan psychologists with evil in mind control the hijackers' actions using drugs and psychopolitical methods.
Like they do.
Then there's the Friends in Oil, which is a very, very common one. 75 top professors and scientists comprising 9/11 Scholars for Truth believe people in the oil industry, along with President Bush, puppeteered the events in order to secure oil reserves, which is an interesting one. Number 2, the most popular, is Mossad, which actually purports that Israeli agents orchestrated the events to involve America in battles with the enemies of the Jewish state. And then finally, number 1 is the neocons. This is the only one I actually believe, because actually I think the neocons had a lot to do with it. And to be honest, there's no bigger neocon than Dick Cheney, and I think this is the only conspiracy theory I remotely agree with. And basically, it argues that neocons on the Council of Foreign Relations initiated and permitted the attacks to initiate the US conflict in the Middle East. And let's face
You're listening to Tachyon Radio.
Weeks later, people were trying to cover over my explanation of it with voiceovers, so that just proves it, doesn't it?
Strategically placed plug.
No, that's usually in the bath, that, mate.
You see, I told you Steve was evil, Dave. You don't believe me.
No. I apologise for that. I was just trying to clear the list and pressed the wrong button, so I apologise for that, mate.
So there we are. I mean, we've been through. I think what's been interesting from my perspective is I was coming in as a kind of, trying to be the honest broker, voice of reason, but actually what we've all spoken about is not unreasonable doubts about the physical and mechanical and biological evidence from the scenes. And
exactly.
What we've actually been debunking are largely silly stories that actually, my theory about conspiracy theories is they serve the governments very nicely because they draw attention away from genuine, if you like, arguments about what actually happened.
That's what we were saying before. The problem is that a lot of the scientific studies which have been taken up for this are very easily poo-pooed when you get somebody saying that, you know, there was no aircraft, it was a hologram. It doesn't quite help the cause, does it?
It's easy to actually... there's no better thing than hiding a truth in plain sight by actually just dusting it with the icing sugar of nonsense.
Well, like Dave was saying before about Roswell, it's very similar to that. First of all, it was a weather balloon, then it was a super secret weather balloon, then it was a weather balloon which had monkeys attached, then it was a super secret weather balloon that had crash test dummies attached, and one day somebody's going to say, come on, tell us what it is, and they'll turn around and say, well, look, tell you what, it really was a crashed flying saucer. And the response is going to be, no, come on, seriously, what was it? And that's
they may as well have done that in the first place, and people wouldn't have believed them then.
Do you know what, Dave? You've hit the nail on the head there. Very often, I think because we're all so conditioned to not just fiction, you know, in terms of TV series and so on, and movies and stories and conspiracy theories. I think we're also conditioned to expecting lies and untruths and lack of clarity. That if somebody actually just came out and told us the truth, nobody would believe it.
No, that's it. You just hype it up so much that in the end nobody's going to believe a damn thing, are they?
Yeah.
Okay, and with that we're going to wrap up it tonight on Tachyon Radio. I'm glad that you've I hope that you've stuck with us for the past 3 hours and so in regards of our conspiracy theory night. We'll be back on there sometime shortly with some more amazing do's, don'ts and whatevers. God knows what it's going to be. You know what it's like here. Anything will take our fancy and we'll be on air anyway. Dave, can you stay there for a couple of minutes, mate, and we'll be straight back to you. All we're going to do now, we're just going to hand back programming to our auto DJ overnight, and all we want to say is good night, God bless, and thanks for joining us.
Night all.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.